Welcome, Islam. Are you in?
Sorry, Dr. Stanley.
Oh, okay, all right.
I think we can start, yeah?
All right. Thank you very much, and good morning. All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on your location. Depending on your location. I'm very honored and pleased to be part of this panel. I'm Colin Stanley, the acting dean for the Faculty of Computing and Informatics. For now, I will just do I will welcome you. So welcome to the Computing and Fourth Industrial Revolution, C and 4IR, African workshop. And this is part of the International Conference on Data Science, Machine Learning, and Artificial Intelligence, hosted by the Faculty of Computing and Informatics here at the Namibia University of Science and Technology. As we all know, the rate of change is exponential, especially in this new era that we are in. And it is disrupting almost every industry, its norm across the planet. But as we know that as we reconnect globally with each other in this new era, we are finding new ways on how to connect and provide unique values to each other. So this is quite exciting times. And we know that data science, machine learning, or all these emerging technologies for the fourth AR have an impact of the skills for our future generations. And it's all up to us, especially to ensure that our own ways are included in this artificial intelligence. And especially from the African continent, we need to consider our African epistemologies, our ways of constructing knowledge, so that they are also part of these emerging technologies. So today I'm joined by academics, practitioners that will share their expertise, and also just to clarify to the community, especially here at home in Namibia, what is fourth industrial revolution? What are the impacts and challenges for Africa, or also what they have experienced in their location where they are today? So with those few remarks for opening, so please, you are welcome. And we will have discussions, very engaging discussions. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us here online. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Colin.
Yes.
Thank you a lot. Ketevi?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Dr. Stanley, for the welcome address. And we are right on time. I'm not sure if anybody has any comments or anything else before we go to the next talk. So I'm not sure, is Dr. Anicia Peters with us yet?
Not yet, so we can proceed. She will join us just in a minute.
Oh, in that case, we wait for her, right? Because we are still a little bit running early. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Still 2 minutes before her talk.
Oh, okay.
And if there are any additional insights you want to share with us, Stanley, Colin, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the most important in this discussion is to first really that the general public also understand just the basic terms. What are we talking about when we are talking about data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence? I will take a small analogy of a child growing up. You'll notice that we human beings are born with some intelligence, but we also get get the data. We observe and listen to things. So we do a lot of data gathering, and then we learn quite a lot, and also we do deep learning. So and we make we make intelligent decisions. I mean, if you compare that analogy with the terms that we have just put on forth here, you can see that this is doable, and as long as we are ensuring that we are putting our correct values, human values, I mean, especially that. So I think that's the most important thing, that this is not something very strange. It's something that is doable, and we need to show that it is have the right impact on our society. I just wanted to add that few aspects of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin. So how is it going there in Namibia? I think I was there two years ago for the African School of Physics. I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Dharam Singh. And I know that at NUS there, you guys have a very strong computing department. So could you share maybe your vision a little bit with us?
Yeah. So thank you for really asking that question. From our side, there are questions at times that, what are you doing about fourth industrial revolution? Are you part of this boat? Are you lost, or are you not on the boat? And our answer is usually yes, we are part of this. And at times people take fourth industrial revolution at one dimension. We are talking about a lot of emerging technologies that assist the intelligent networking of processes, machines, and people. And these technologies, they are very different technologies. Now, if you think of some of these technologies, they are part of our curricula. They are part of our undergrad. So we do have courses on artificial intelligence. We do have a full-fledged program on cybersecurity. So, and from next year, we are rolling out a master's in data science. So we are part of this revolution. And our vision for the faculty is to showcase that by creating our own products that ensure that we really do our jobs better. We have real-time data that inform our decisions, and that replicated to the overall university and also to the country. So the projects that we really worked with the communities and industry are really part of that vision, to ensure that what we are mandated to do, we achieve, we create products that are used. So that is, I have also colleagues that will come in to share on the projects that we worked on. So that is the vision that we are really striving to achieve, to ensure that our graduates, they can do the things for themselves. They don't need to walk into an office. They can use crowdsourcing platform to create solutions that allow them to connect with the global society. So that's the vision of our faculty, to ensure that our graduates, they can really get the job done.
Thank you, Dr. Stanley. I don't see Dr. Peters in the audience. What would you advise us to do?
For now, we can proceed to the next two, because she can jump in any. I think the sequence is not so important.
Okay.
Unless, yeah.
Okay. Rita, you want to take over the?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, I will take over. So I think Professor Peters can intervene whenever she wants, because remind you that the talk of every speaker is about 10 to 15 minutes, but to keep on schedule. I remind you also that they are recorded. So I would like to call Professor Nayak, who is immediate past president of Computer Science of India and past president of ICSCA. Please, Professor Nayak. Easy.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Should I start?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Honorable Workshop Chair, Dr. KTV, and the moderator, Ma'am Geeta Rahal, and Professor Colin Stalin, and Anisha Peter Singh Jardi, who is the key architect of this African workshop. I am really very much grateful to Namibia University of Science and Technology in general and Dr. Dharam Singh in particular for inviting me on this great occasion of 4 days international conference on data science, machine learning and artificial intelligence. That too very auspicious occasion of this workshop that has been organized today, that is the African workshop, particularly on the very vital theme computing and the 4th industrial revolution. That's really where the whole world is looking forward to the industry 4.0, that in the name of the 4th industrial revolution. And in that time, organizing these kinds of workshops are very vital because many points can be discussed upon and many concepts can be evolved so that that can be recommended to the policy maker for the proper implementation. My dear friends, everybody of us knows that necessity is the mother of invention, and when the necessity is there, that somebody searches for some discovery and some invention. That is why somebody has told every cupboard is uncovered when it is discovered. Every cupboard is uncovered when it is discovered. That means what the meaning of telling this thing? Because the thing is that when the technology emerges, particularly a technology like ICT, information and communication technology, we must have to test, to make the research to identify the best potentiality of this particular technology. Perhaps by the result of that, today we are at the point of discussion of the Industry 4.0. My dear friends, we can see when the industrial revolution started, that why we have demonstrated that Industry 4.0. So definitely we have surpassed the Industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. And in a beginning of the 18th, at the latter of the 18th century, say it in 1760 to 1820, that the industrial revolution, first industrial revolution was being made, and by identifying the potentiality of the steam industry, steam energy as well as the water power. So generally the basic purpose of the setting of the industry and the optimal objective of the industrial application, because anyhow we can have to enhance efficiency and profitability. That is the cause. That is why you always interface the appropriate technology, how these 3 factors can be optimally achieved. So far as the productivity is concerned, efficiency is concerned, effectivity is concerned, as well as the profitability is concerned. That is why we have utilized the power of the steam energy and the water power in first industrial revolution. But what happened in the 1870 to 1915, and we have seen the world has seen the second industrial revolution when the road networks have been established, the rail networks have been established, and particularly the telegraph network has been established, along with the electricity have been utilized and integrated for the industrial application. By that way, the productivity, efficiency, as well as the effectivity and profitability have increased more, and that given the shape of the second industrial revolution. And what happened to the third industrial revolution after the Second World War? So to say, the industrial productivity has been comparatively very less after the Second World War. But the thing is that fortunately, by the mid of the by the 20th century, after the Second World War of 1944, 1946, the world has seen the first digital computer in the name of ENIAC, which has got developed in the Pennsylvania University of the United States of America by the 2 electrical engineering professors, James Eckert and John Macaulay. The digital era has started. The digital era has started. That means we can take the ancient digital transformation have been started from the middle of the 20th century, say 1946 and in 1951 we have got a full-fledged computer named as the UNIVAC, and after that actually the revolutionary digital revolution and digital revolution has started and digital transformation has started. Of course, we perform the operations of the computer by the machine code at that time, then assembly code. But fortunately, in late 50s and 1957, the high-level language pattern got developed, and after that series of high-level language come COBOL in 1962, BASIC in 1964, Pascal in 1971, and so on. That means the digital empowerment, so far the digital transformation is concerned, has started from the mid-90s, and in 60s we have started the computing in the scientific environment, in the research laboratories, the universities, and all the related fields. 70s we started the commercial application and the business data processing, business application, and when the business application has started, the volume of data and the volume of information got exponentially increased. Then that is the nature and structure of the industrial applications of the computer and our computer application in the industry. And due to the competitive growth in the business and market as well as the industries, the volume of data has grown exponentially. That is why from time to time, better data management technology have been sought, by the result of which 1970 we have got the file management system, 80 database management system, 90 relational database management system, 2000 data mining, 2005 data warehousing, 2010 big data, and at the doorstep the data science, which is the focal theme of this international conference, the data science. The volume of data when increased in the industrial application, the volume increased in the business application, definitely better intelligence was being sought, so that the right decision can be taken at the right time to take the right decision by the right peoples. That is why the artificial intelligence, which has got incepted in 1956, got empowered from time to time by the empowerment of the digital application like voice synthesis, image processing, networking, internetworking, and multimedia applications. And that is the particular form of the business of artificial intelligence to tackle the big volume of data that termed as the business intelligence, and particularly in the to tackle the data they could not manage in a centralized data processing system. That is why dependent on the distributed environment, say cloud computing, the collaborative environment of the computing. So whatever it may be, technology has been developed from time to time. Many emergent technologies has come. So from networking to high-speed networking, from embedded computing, that is the smart computing and all these things, and the latest development of IoT and sensor computing and smart computing, along with the communication ability in all these things. The third industrial revolution, which happened since the mid of the 20th century, that happened due to the utilization of the digital technologies in the industrial application, particularly computer and communication, as well as the processing system in the production industry. But what happened since the continuous development in the pace of the information technology, and due to the development of the latest technological the computing methods and technologies, that as I have mentioned, the varieties of technologies we are having, whether you talk of the starting from the embedded computing or the smart computing or the sensor computing or the that stage of quantum, whatever it may be. The term the IoT have been coined in 1980, I think so, late 90s, by the Stevin, and that why, though the IoT concept has come through which the machine got the capability of communicating. That the IoT then divide from the latest version, the IoE, Internet of Everything, and which has enabled that the communication between two things, communication between two devices, as well as machine-to-machine communication, machine-to-man communication, and man-to-machine communication. So, due to that thing, the emergence of IoT and IoE, perhaps the industry 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution can be thought of, and which can with a lot of characteristics. That is, we have thought of the fourth industry 4.0 due to the different factor. That is one, due to the high power, the power of the computing has provided us the interconnectivity facility, the information transparency facility, the technological assistance facilities, as well as the on-demand availability of the computers, as well as the decentralization of the decision-making capacity. These are the factors which have forced us to go towards the industry 4.0. And you see,
Prof. Nayak, just to tell you, you have still 1 or 2 minutes to go. It's just to stay a little bit on schedule. I'm sorry.
Germany, we started the industrial revolution industry 4.0 or fourth industrial revolution in the year 2013 and 14. Of course, this is the first country who has started. But in the after 15, almost all countries are getting and booming up to adopt the industry 4.0. But I must have to tell, the industry 4.0 will provide the facility to make the factory to a smart factory, make the machine to the smart machine, machines will communicate with the machine, and production control will be done automatically. But we will have to face a lot of challenges before this. So far as the challenges are concerned, in place of the economic challenges, because huge investment is required and a new business model is required. Those will be the economic challenge before the different countries. We'll be getting some social challenges also. The privacy will be at the greatest threat in this application, and as well as the other social challenges we can get. We can get some political challenges also. The lack of regulations, the unclear legal issues, as well as the data security, all these things. And organization challenges will be there. That is, the IT security problem will be there. The training of the new shape of the employees are required. The training of the employees are there. So these are the different challenges that the different country has to address if they want to implement the industry 4.0 in a very effective and productive manner. I must have to make my submission before this August gathering, who have been gathered today on the occasion of the African workshop for giving a shape towards the fourth industrial revolution policy, and which will be helping the Namibia government for taking over or carrying over the smooth industrial 4.0 implementation. So definitely these social issues, these political issues, these economic issues and organizational issues, these 4 issues should be properly addressed by this workshop, and that is my optimum hope that I expect from this August gathering who have been gathered today. With these words, I want to conclude my speech because the time is limited. I have been arranged only 15 minutes time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Namibia University of Science and Technology. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Dr. Dharam Singh Ji. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you very much, Professor Nayak.
Thank you, Professor Nayak.
Go ahead. You wanted to say something, Dharam?
No, it's fine, yeah, you can continue, okay. Doctor. Sorry.
Okay. If you have one brief question to Professor Nayak, is someone having a question for Professor Nayak? No. So I would like to thank you for this very exhaustive view and the presentation of the challenges ahead. And I'm happy to see that Professor Anicia Peters has joined us, and I have the honor to call her to present to this workshop. Thank you, Professor Peters.
Good afternoon, esteemed delegates, speakers, participants, and members of the media and any distinguished guests that we have today. Thank you so much for inviting me to this forum. Yes, I see that it's good evening for some of you, although for some of us it's good afternoon. I'm extremely happy to be here. And I'm extremely happy. I just had a quick browse through participants. I'm also quite happy to see the turnout. And I'm happy to see some of you I haven't seen in a while. And so it's also great to be here. So I was asked to speak specifically a little bit about the task force that was recently appointed by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Namibia. And it's a 4IR task force, of which I was appointed the chair of. We have 8 members on the task force. That includes the 2 vice chancellors from the 2 public universities in Namibia. Then we also have the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, who happened to be the Deputy Chairperson of the 4IR Task Force in South Africa. And they had concluded their work last year already, towards the end of last year already. That task force in particular was chaired by the President of South Africa. So Professor Marvala, the VC of University of Johannesburg, was working sort of directly with him. We also have Dr. Martijn Davies, who is the responsible for Deloitte and Touch Africa operations. So those are the 2 sort of international complements we have on the task force. And then we have, representation from the Bank of Namibia, from the Namibia Investment Board, and then we have from the Internet Society of Namibia. So all in all, it was an 8-member task force that was appointed with a mandate to conduct a country assessment and host the Namibia Artificial Intelligence Conference in April 2022. So the country assessment is required to determine the readiness of Namibia for the 4th Industrial Revolution and make recommendations towards a coordinated and coherent policy and legislative framework that will enable our country to exploit and harness opportunities presented by the 4th Industrial Revolution. Key technological levers in place, however, it is still fragmented across the public and private sectors and civil society, including academia, women, and youth. Now, usually for those who know me, I'm not too keen to speak about the 4th Industrial Revolution because I am actually, for a while already, I've always been looking forward actually to the next revolution, to the 5th Industrial Revolution. However, I also recognize that we have sectors that are behind in certain aspects, and then sectors are ahead in certain aspects, and certainly with countries, and especially if one wants to do a countrywide type of focus, then one certainly still has to speak about the 4th Industrial Revolution. This task force, its mandate is essentially that country assessment. And what we have done is we've gone and we've actually had specific work streams or thematic areas within the task force that we are looking at, and that we had made each one of our task force members responsible for. And they, of course, solicit a number of stakeholders and assistance in what they are doing. So one of the work streams is then future of work and labor force reskilling, as well as human capacity development. This is a very big area because whenever in Namibia, at least on social media, whenever the public hears about the 4th Industrial Revolution, they say, no, we don't want it, we don't want it. This is not the time now. We are in COVID time. Ironically, we are in COVID time. So this should not be the focus. And the one thing that one hears repetitively is the robots are here to take our jobs. And so we often a certain people that with every single industrial revolution, yes, there were job losses, but it's not necessarily job losses, it's transformation of jobs. It means that we are creating new jobs. And therefore, one needs to reskill and upskill. So this future of work, labor force reskilling and human capacity development in Namibia, across the public and the private sectors, as well as in the workplace, and of course at institutions of higher education, is what we are assessing. We're also assessing the impact of artificial intelligence on labor force dynamics and the future of work. So we do pay particular attention, to the fears of people as well, as to put the Namibian public at ease, but also ensuring that we don't have excessive impacts. Then we're looking at the policy and regulatory environment. In Namibia, this is one of the biggest challenges that we have, not only in the 4IR space, but in general in ICT. Our cybercrimes bill has been, in the making for many, many years. And I don't even want to tell you at this audience how many years, because it's a bit embarrassing to do that. But nonetheless, we had made strides also in that we have the online transactions bill. We had made some minor strides with some other bills in like with child pornography, etc. But data protection is still an issue, and that bill still hasn't even made it, to the National Assembly. So on policy and regulatory environment, we're not only looking at what policies are in place, what new policies we need to create for the fourth industrial revolution to get Namibia using it as an enabler for growth. But we're also looking at how do we speak to parliamentarians, politicians? How do we sensitize and educate them? And how do we ensure that we have a fast-track process and continuously keeping pace with the new advances in technology and adjusting our policy and regulatory frameworks accordingly? Then we're also looking at industry. Industry in this sense, meaning the private sector, the future industries that the 4IR technologies will create, the manufacturing support, economic incentives, targeted import substitution, targeted micro, small, and medium enterprise support for 4IR businesses, the startups, inclusive growth, and shared prosperity. We're also looking at investment as one of the sub areas that touches on several of the other thematic areas that we're looking at. Then we are looking at governance and national data. In Namibia, one of our problems is that most of the time, for many of our systems, our data does not only does it not reside with us, but I think it's more of a matter that we don't have control and access to our own data. Our data is always stored somewhere else with, the ones who are in charge of the national of the systems, having the ownership and the access over that data. And this is for us a very big issue that we would like to have a national data center. But that we also want to exercise ownership and control over our own data. And of course, you can imagine when one speaks about data, then one speaks about cybersecurity just throughout all of the key focus areas. And as I say, specifically touching on national data. And then we are also looking at government, and we're expected to make recommendations on necessary public service reforms towards smart governance. Then we are looking at the research and development, and in that we have to identify priority areas for R&D and innovation, looking at facilities, looking at how do we partner with private sector in getting R&D sort of more developed in Namibia, because it's one of the areas that we're always lagging behind. And if one looks at the global competitiveness and innovation index, it's actually one of the areas that Namibia has always pointed out as having a weakness, in that the number of full-time researchers, the number of R&D facilities, etc. We're generally also looking at infrastructure, 4IR infrastructure, to assess the existing national hard and soft infrastructure networks, identify gaps, and make recommendations towards integrating 4IR infrastructure into a coherent and comprehensive national network, unlocking connectivity and efficiencies. And then one area that was added as well, and I must admit that's something that I had added, is a thematic area or work stream that looks particularly at the core 4IR technologies. That's the emerging technologies. So it's, for instance, but not limited to, AI, IoT, machine learning, robotics, blockchain. So it's and 3D printing. It's looking at those core ones and looking across the spectrum of, do we have the skills? Do we have the incentives for it? Do we have, the right infrastructure for it? So that's sort of a self-contained part of it. And then looking at the economics of it, does it make sense? Where do we want to roll it out? A very big thing that we are identifying is core strategic projects for Namibia that we can showcase, what we are doing here. So besides the country assessment, we're also after some of the projects that we can already demonstrate to the Namibian people, because the Namibian public is a little bit, not convinced that this is what we need to focus on. And we basically want to make the case that this is the application areas, and this is really how we can touch the lives of the rural woman who's living in a remote village, who has, stole the radio. And I oftentimes make the case and say, yes, the rural woman also has a smartphone and is connected to the internet and is using, Facebook and Twitter, and that is actually powered by artificial intelligence. But of course, it goes a long way for us to always make the case. So we really want to showcase the application of technologies in how does it impact lives and livelihoods of Namibians. So I want to speak about, I think that I've already sort of touched on in Namibia, what are our core pain points that we have that we want to focus on. And I want to give, sort of from experience, the areas that we've been for a long time actually been, lagging and challenging actually those areas. And this is the one of skills. The thing is, we can train the students in artificial intelligence, we can train them in blockchain, etc. But once they leave the university, for instance, they have nowhere to go, because guess what? The private sector and the industry is really still immature as far as that's concerned. They haven't made available those positions. And by the way, they do have those positions and they do need the people, but the R&D is not located within Namibia. And even Namibian tech companies still have their R&D located outside of Namibia. And this is one of the areas that we really want to address. And I was happy to learn that there is one of the giant commercial banks who, the CEO called me up and said to me, hey, I asked my team that I'm challenging the status quo, because we're always saying that we don't have skills in Namibia and therefore we can't have our R&D here. And I actually want I told the team, okay, what happens if we turn it upside down, we bring the R&D here, and then we see whether we really have the skills. And if we don't have the skills, we build them, even if we have to import the skills and then build slowly but surely our skills up. And that's the type of mindset that we actually want to have going forward into the task force. Sorry? my time?
नहीं बाद में बात करेंगे कॉन्फ्रेंस नाम्बिया यूनिवर्सिटी
Sorry, Dr. Nayak, could you switch mute, please? Because we hear you on the phone.
Okay.
Professor Peters, yes, you have 2 minutes left if you don't mind, because, but it is very interesting. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I'm almost done, so the 2 minutes is fine. The policy and legislative environment is what I was talking about as well. And this is, for instance, that we don't even have proper payment instruments. In Namibia, you can't have a PayPal account. You cannot do international transfers. It's very limited. Then we also have, you know, really archaic sort of acts, like our Bank of Namibia has acts dating from 1934. And yet at the same time, you have this push and pull effect, because government is looking at using blockchain technologies, and government is actually looking at Bitcoin introductions as well. Maybe they're looking at it. But you have these acts that is not really allowing it, that doesn't create that enabling framework. And then, of course, the investment and the funding for this sector of ICT in particular is really lagging. So those are some of the big challenges that we are having. And I think that in conclusion, one of the things that I've been doing, you know, in talking to the Namibian public, and this is perhaps a question that I want to throw out to you as well. How do we get through to the ordinary folks? How do we convince them, you know, that the 4IR is not here, you know, to take their jobs away, to, you know, to send them into oblivion? The robots are not taking over, etc. And oftentimes I use, for example, the very examples, you know, like drones delivering medication, mobile apps that's already using AI, you know, in social media, that's on people's phones, you know, the health records, the biometric sensors that we have everywhere in Namibia, the pacemakers that people have already. We don't have driverless cars in Namibia yet, but it's coming, the IoT that we're using in agriculture. So those are some of the sort of the questions that we are tackling within this task force. And so that is finally what I would welcome, is to how do you take the conversation further in layman's terms, you know, that the rural woman in the remote area with just the radio can understand what does this industrial revolution actually means, and how can those technologies actually help in enabling and improving the livelihood. I thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Peters. And I think the problems and the challenges that you have highlighted are common to many, many countries, developed or underdeveloped, or any kind of third or fourth world. It's all general. The problem also of the people taking these advances and the new technologies and new innovations as not being disturbant for their own life is also a very big challenge that should be, of course, taken seriously. And from my personal point of view, I think that the only way is education at the lowest level, to educate the people that all the technologies are only technologies, but they are also technologies, and they should serve them for their life, for their job, and for their development. So thank you very much. Is there any other question or comment to what Professor Peters said? Yes, I see a raising hand from Mr. Goodwill, Dr. Goodwill. Yes, could you speak?
Good day to everybody. It's just Mr. Goodwill. My question is, my question is to Prof. Peters. How, if even possible, can we promote a culture to create rather than to simply use information technology. And we also refer to the DSMLAI. By how I mean convince our current leaders that this is the direction we need to embrace and invest heavily on as a nation.
Thank you, Professor Peters.
That one, actually, I happen to know Mr. Goodwill. How are you, Mr. Kua?
Very fine. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good. And he's actually a teacher. And you know how we start to change the culture from consumers to actually makers starts in the schools. And it starts actually at the entry levels, you know, where the kids come in. I was privileged enough to have my kids, you know, go to, some of them went to Namibian schools, some of them went to the US schools. And in the US schools, they started learning, and seriously, they started learning programming from kindergarten, which is just before you start with grade 1. And they had those computer classes like once a week. And that's, we can have a whole conversation about how they did that, because we actually wrote a paper, myself and one of the deans of engineering here at UNAM, who also had kids in the US. And we actually wrote a whole paper on education and how the Namibian education sector could actually benefit from the lessons that we've made. The second thing is, recall that I said the politicians, if we want to change the acts, and help to keep pace with the advances in technology, we actually have to educate the politicians. Because how can they make laws when they don't understand, you know, what it is about? So for me, there are 2 layers on that. And as far as generally creators and maker spaces, I think we need to encourage more of this entrepreneurship type of culture. You know, if the students are doing their, you know, they always have these projects they have to do throughout all of the modules that they're doing, then take that and take it further and let them develop it, you know, into something that they can market and teach them the all-round skills on it, because we still keep on abandoning it. And I don't often see things come out of the university as it should be coming out. I don't see those immediate startups and spin-offs from our research coming out. So I think that it's a multi-tier approach, but most definitely the schools for me are one of the key things. Thank you.
Thank you.
One quick question,
sorry.
Dr. Enika. Dr. Enika, is one quick question.
I think there is the Mr. Amu Gongo before that has raised his hand. So please, Mr. Amu Gongo.
Thank you. Maybe for me, mine is not necessarily a question, but just a comment to say thank Professor Nisha for all for actually contextualizing what the task force, the 4AR task force will do, and I 100% agree with her. Education is key, upskilling. And that's how you make people understand. And I think just like the policy that President Obama made in 2014, where he made compulsory computer studies in all American schools, it's the same approach we should take as a country as well. Computer studies should be compulsory in all Namibian schools. And there at the beginning, we incarnate the culture of innovation and coding, because coding just does not only teach you to make application, but it also teaches you problem-solving skills. Teaches kids to become problem solvers, and they will leverage on that to create solutions that solve local challenges. And anything that solves a local challenge is commercial. It can become a commercial product, and that's where you get a lot of your innovation will come from. And another thing where I will support Professor Nisha is that we really need research and innovation to be happening locally. And one way to actually do it, make sure that we have the funds to do it, is we need a levy for research and innovation. The companies must pay for research and innovation, because if they don't do do the research and innovation here, the money that come from the levy can be used and be invested in the focus areas so that we can make sure that we also develop stuff and create patents and things like that. And also one thing that I think is very, very important, and this is one thing that I put in the Fourth Industrial Revolution strategy for Ochozunjupa region, which is one of the regions in the country, is to embrace agile governance. And this comes from software engineering. We all know agile development, but with agile governance is that we know this technological innovation is moving so fast. So we need ways to also change how we govern that agility to be able to embrace to change laws fast. And one of the laws and legal framework can be actually set in a way that it's flexible to enable changes after every year or two or something like that. And
thank you, Dr. Kamugongo. I'm sorry, thank you for your comments, but I think I have to stop here the discussion just for the sake of the full workshop. And I'm sorry for the persons that want to ask questions, but I think we will proceed and they can ask their questions later. Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Peters. And I would like to invite Dr. Abbe Samant, that is Chief Software Engineer in National Instruments, Texas, USA, to make his presentation. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Greetings. Can everyone hear me well? Thumbs up.
Yes.
And can people see my slides?
We do.
Yeah, we can see you.
Awesome. Very good. Greetings, everyone. Like Geeta said, my name is Abhay Samant. I work as Chief Software Engineer at National Instruments here in Austin, Texas. And I also serve as an adjunct faculty in the EC department at UT Austin. Thank you, Dr. Peters, for that good discussion and background. It's almost like I was building on the talk that you gave about the technology pillars that we have for Industry 4.0. And what I'm going to do today in the 10 to 12 minutes that Dr. Singh has given me is definitely emphasize on the fourth industrial revolution, but also speak about what are the new technologies that are coming that are going to enable the fourth industrial revolution and future, like Dr. Peters talked about, because fourth industrial revolution has been around for a long time. It's a time for Africa now, the African continent, to be looking ahead and see what are the new technologies that are going to drive more jobs, improve the quality of life in people. To Dr. Peters' point, it's not about if I speak to my mom about Internet of Things, she wouldn't understand it, but she understands how the quality of life, how medical facilities empower her and my father and folks around her doing that. And that's the message that we need to drive in different parts of the world. India is one example as well. But to build on Dr. Peters' point, yes, 3D printing, big data analytics, advanced robotics, these are all the pillars that are driving this. The theme of this conference is definitely in computing, and that plays a very important role. The off-premise computing, whether it's in the cloud, in the fog, is going to be a key driving principle. Cognitive computing, which is the ability of the computers to think and reconfigure themselves in the presence of new environments, is going to be extremely important. But what's equally important is the communication technology that's going to drive it. And I chose my 10 minutes to speak about the next advancement in communication technology, which is in 6th generation. And yes, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, 5G is still not rolling out. But if you're looking at leadership, especially an opportunity for Africa to drive leadership in communication, it's time not to look in the rear view window, but look ahead, look forward. And then looking forward now is about 6G. Now, what is 6G? 6G is going to really, truly enable a wide array of applications that are especially important for developing nations like India, like the African continent, whether it's imaging and radar technologies, device locations, device locating or ability to locate devices. We have so many spread assets all over the continent, that ability to find and locate those devices so they can be optimally used to improve the quality of livelihood, and the quality of life and livelihood is going to be important. Wireless sensing is another application that 6G is going to fuel in this area of the fourth and future industrial revolution. 6G is also important because it heavily talks about the energy and the cost aspect of it. The coverage, the continent is so big, is we need to make sure that we're investing the right amount of research and development dollars into the currency, into looking at coverage across a wide geographic area, making sure that the connections are reliable and they're always present, they're accessible. It's not just about saying that medical devices can be enabled by 6G and the fourth industrial revolution, is are they actually accessible to those folks over there? That's going to be important. And then some of the enabling technologies, to Dr. Peter's point, if we go to schools now, we go to universities in Namibia and say, hey, let's start research today on some of these technologies. What are those? For 6G, it is going to be joint communication and sensing. It's going to be spectrum sharing. It's going to be machine learning and AI. Higher frequencies and distributed MIMO applications. So I can speak at length about all four of these, but I only have 6 more minutes remaining. So I'm going to focus on two where I am doing active research, and I would like to invite my fellow researchers in Africa to come and talk to me offline if any of those specific areas are going to be interesting. And that's specifically where I'm focused on is in joint sensing and communication, and of course, AI and artificial intelligence. So I'm going to talk in the next 3 slides, the importance of those and some of the concepts that I'm looking at. That goal over here is just to disseminate information and see if there are some other ideas that get sparked from this communication. So why is joint sensing and communication important? Needless to say, this has been talked about for a long, long time. Spectrum is a scarce resource, and especially for developing nations and continents, it is important that we use the spectrum wisely. Spectrum costs a lot of money. A lot of the times when governments are deciding the policies, sometimes it's hard because there are few nations, few big corporates that have a monopoly on the spectrum. So if you have a limited amount of spectrum, how do you use it wisely is going to be important. Now, in the past, this issue was mostly about communication devices using spectrum. Now it is both the communication devices and also your radar devices that are going to be using the spectrum. Think of your car, right? Your car doesn't just have a 5G or a Wi-Fi connectivity. It also has sensors that need connectivity over there. So now these both devices are now competing for the same scarce resource that we have. So how do we actually make this happen? That's one of the focus areas I'm looking for. And the idea essentially is that the 6G funded or driven research on joint communication and sensing. So how can we make communication systems be more context aware of what's going on? Using radar, can we make communication systems be more context aware? How do we minimize interference between these two technologies so that the technology is accessible, is available to everyone all the times? And then what are the applications besides automotive, Industry 4.0? What are the other applications? To Dr. Peter's point, Industry 4.0 has been talked about for a long, long time now. What are the next applications that this joint communication and sensing is going to be enabling? So that's one of the things that I'm looking at. If there are folks in the audience who are interested in working more on this, I can share my email ID and we can talk offline. And then this concept of AI and ML is so prevalent all the time. What I've been looking at is this concept of metacognitions. Like, how do you make machines learn? It's not about just machine learning, but how do you build machines that are capable of learning? How do you build higher levels of cognition in machines so that they can use this multiple cognitive functions, such as in a human body? The human body has 5 cognitive principles of perception, attention, memory, language, and intelligence, right? This is how we as human beings grow. How can a machine learn that? How can we make a machine learn those things so that we can build? And very specifically, again, ML AI is a broad topic. My research team is looking specifically on cognitive radar applications and cognitive electronic warfare systems and how they can be used over there. And there is room for AI in all of those elements over here. So just to bring everything together in the last minute or so, I think it's an amazing opportunity for African leadership in this area of 6G and Industry 4.0 and beyond, right? And it starts by going to schools, to Dr. Peter's point, and making sure that the universities and the students at the universities are given the opportunity to build on this next generation of technologies that is coming up, right? The questions that we as researchers and teachers should be asking is, are we teaching the right type of information to the students? Are we preparing researchers and scientists who are going to carve the path for this industrial leadership and leadership that Africa has in the space of 6G and 5G and 6G and Industry 4.0 and beyond? That's all I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samant. One question in direct and the rest on the chat. Who has a question? I don't see any direct question because I think people are thinking about what you said, and the questions will come soon. Thank you very much again, and thank you. And I propose to pass to the next speaker, who is Dr. Islam Farwat Abdel Halim, who is assistant professor at Misr International University. Dr. Abdel Halim, please.
Thank you, Dr. Rahil. I'd like to thank also Prof. Dahram for giving me this opportunity to be with you in the African workshop. You know, this is a very important event for all the African people. It's a very interesting thing to meet on a regular basis to discuss with each other the most relevant topics we need to help us. Some problems you are facing the European and American people who are not facing here in the African countries. So it's my pleasure to be with you. I will share with you my slides today.
So I don't see your slides.
Okay, I'm sharing, sorry.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry. So just 2 seconds. I hope it appears for you now.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. First, I know this the conference about the artificial intelligence and data science. However, the theme of this workshop is about the computing of the fourth industrial revolution. So building on the speech of Professor Dr. Peters and Samant about the pillars of the fourth industrial revolution, I believe that one of the most important technologies, the fundamental technology for the digital transformation and the fourth industrial is the cloud computing. So I'd like to share with you some thoughts about the cloud computing technology. You know, the revolutions of the
slide is not moving. Ah, okay, thank you.
Sorry, it seems that in the sense of the fourth industrial revolution, you know, the trend towards the automation and data exchange in manufacturing technology, the processes which include cyber physical systems, also the most emerging technologies that could be considered the pillars of the fourth industrial revolution, like the Internet of Things, the cloud computing, as Dr. the communication about the 5G and 6G, as well as the artificial intelligence. So you know the humanity have several revolutions, starting from the steam, then the electricity, about the evolvement of the computing, and now we are living the fourth industrial computing. You know, in some African regions, and one of the most important challenges that how to define the right terminologies. You know, so there is a big problem in defining one of the most important, like the digital transformation. You know, the digital transformation is one of the most important projects and the output of the fourth industrial revolution. So there is some confusion about some terminologies like digitalization and the digital transformation. So I'd like to make sure that you know that the difference between the most critical terminology. The digitalization here refers to creating digital representation of physical object, like, you know, the scanning of paper. You have a hard copy of the paper, so you scan it to a soft copy or like PDF or something like that. However, the digitalization is the process of developing, enhancing, or enabling, or improving the business processes by leveraging digital technologies. On the other side, the digital transformation is really a business transformation enabled the digitalization. So it's about how to utilize the most emerging technologies in order to enhance the living of the people. You know, several benefits about the advantage and digital transformation. Now we have about the most 10 valuable brands of 2020, maybe 8 of them are considered an IT or ICT companies that invest in the digital transformation and the fourth industrial revolution. As well, we need to understand some of the aspects of the digital transformation which lead to the fourth industrial. So, you know, several pillars, several technologies we need to understand: the cloud, the big data, the AI, the cybersecurity. So this is why I'm choosing the cloud computing as one of the most important technology pillar towards the fourth industrial and the digital transformation. The main objective of the cloud computing, there's many objectives we need, but about the elasticity, the ability to scale virtual machine, also and also to fully utilize the computing power we need, being on demand usage, the ability to add or delete as paying as per user requirements, and the multi-tenancy. These are the main objectives about the cloud computing. The cloud computing is still an evolving paradigm. Its definition, use cases, underlying technologies, issues, risk, all of this will be refined and are being refined during our journey about to develop a clear cloud computing concepts. However, we can consider a fundamental definition for the cloud computing is the model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access, you know, regardless of investing the money about building data centers for each organization or institution, and taking all the hassles about the electricity, the power, the power resource, the human being to administrate all this equipment. So the cloud computing is introduced to save all this and to provide a cost-effective solution, especially for the countries, the institution, the organization that face a lot of things. So we are lacking in African in some skills about the financial demand. So I believe that the cloud computing is important to engage with. So I'd like to also introduce the characteristics and the deployment model and the service models for the cloud computing. You know, the cloud computing has 5 essential characteristics: being on demand self-service, so the customers can provision computing capabilities. Also, the broad network access resources are available all over the network through standard mechanism. Also, the resource pooling, the rapid elasticity, so how we can, showing the capabilities can be rapidly and elasticity provision, preferably automatically in an automatic way, and also a measure service. Those 5 essential cloud computing characteristics that should be met in any cloud solution. About the service model of the architecture, the various architecture of the cloud model, we can see here 3 different models: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. They are different from each other about how the vendor which will provide the cloud model manage the infrastructure as a service. The capability provided to the consumer is to rent processing, storage, network, and other fundamental computing resources. Here, the consumer doesn't manage or control the underlying cloud infrastructure, but has the control over operating system and the deployed application. The cloud, the platform as a service, it's different in the model, which the cloud vendor will manage also the middleware services, the operating system, while the software as a service, the vendor will provide a complete the provider to the customer running on a cloud infrastructure. There's all the software, and just the consumer only has control over limited user-specific application. About the deployment models, we have several deployment models like the private cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud. They are different from each other about the ownership of the authority or the institution or the organization that built the cloud. The private cloud, the cloud infrastructure is operated solely for an organization. It may be managed by the organization or a third party, but it's owned by a single organization. While the public cloud is a mega scale cloud infrastructure is made available to the general public or large industry group. While the community cloud, they usually some community or some multiple organization like some universities or some hospitals that share the same goal are building a community cloud. The hybrid cloud is a composition of the 2 models, the public and the private. So the philosophy or the cloud economics is to convert the CapEx to OpEx. You know, there is a CapEx and OpEx for every project. The economics appeal of the cloud is to converting the capital expense to operating expense or pay as you go. This will meet the requirements of many organizations and institutions that they lack of fund. They don't have the human capabilities or the resources to build their infrastructure through the cloud. Especially for some low-income resource institutions or universities, maybe for the self-researchers. So the cloud computing will be their ideal solutions. You know, the market share, there is a huge market share for the cloud. Several cloud providers now, but this shows that Alibaba Cloud, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, AWS is the most important or the most, you know, this brings us to what are the cloud computing trends now. So I'd like, you know, the cloud computing now switching to Gmail, you don't have to watch YouTube. Also, there are many cloud computing trends that we can share. Also focus on the cloud security, the hyper cloud, as well as the artificial intelligence and machine learning in the cloud. Now about 67 of IT professionals thinking about using or utilizing the artificial intelligence and machine learning in the cloud environment. Now we just considering the fastest, this is my last slide, the fastest growing cloud services for 2020. You know, many technology and many technologies that should be run on the cloud that could be pillars or emerging technologies like the IoT, the machine learning, the data warehouse, the data science, serverless. All the growing cloud services are provided through different cloud services. So it's my opinion that the African countries, the African universities now facing a very challenging problem. Why we don't build our own cloud that can support the African nations, the African countries, the African world. This is a very big challenge. We need to collaborate with each other to build our own cloud services that support the development, our specific problems. So this is why I'm choosing this to discuss with. I'd like to thank you. I'm sorry for the time.
No, it's okay. It was great in time. Thank you, Dr. Islam. I think, yes, it would be very exciting to imagine a mutualized cloud between all the African countries that could benefit to each one. I will let Professor Stanley. He raised hand for a question. Please do.
Thank you. Mine is not rather a question, but just a compliment and comment, Dr. Halim, and especially that aspect of community hub. I mean, this is what I always try to bring out there, that, you know, at times people say, how can you talk about Internet of Things if there is no internet? I think internet, we can define it in a local context to say that we need a local community network. It doesn't have to be connected all the time to the global network, but through that local community network, there's a lot of ideas and services that can be harnessed, that there's a lot of innovation that can be taking place. So this is, I really like that approach, and that you put the cloud in broader perspective. So for me, just to say thank, and I think it's true for African countries, we need to really take that opportunity. Thank you.
We hope, and this could be aligned with the terminology, you know, the open science. We can share, maybe it's an idea about some African universities. We need to share some ideas and efforts to facilitate such an opportunity.
Yes, you are right. I think it's very important.
Thank you.
I see no other raised hand. So I would like to thank you again, Dr. Islam, and maybe participate later to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
I invite now Dr. Durgesh Kumar Mishra, who is Professor and Director at Microsoft Innovation Center in India. Professor, Doctor, please.
Yes. I'm audible?
Yes.
Am I audible? Yes, yes. Now, this is what, first of all, thanks to the Namibia University and especially Dr. Dharam Singh for inviting me to speak something about this. And thanks to Dr. Anika Peters. I think we are meeting the second time. First time we meet physically in India, and this is the second time. And thanks Dr. Geeta Rahal and Dr. Pauline and Dr. Nayak is my mentor, Dr. Deshmukh, Dr. Abhay and Dr. Abdel Ali, right? Thank you to all of you and the participants. Now, today is what the talk about something Dr. Anika is very talked about, not the industry 5.0. She initiated about that, and she is having the vision about the industry 5.0. And Dr. Abhay is also talked about the pillars of the industry 4.0. You know, for the industry 4.0 and industry 5.0, what the basic important thing is there? What is the role of the data? What is the role of algorithms? So I think the data is a very important thing. The data will going to become the currency.
Sorry, Dr. Mishra, could you put
yes?
the slide in full screen?
Okay. Right.
If you can.
Okay, it's okay?
Yes, very well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is what we are saying about what the industry 4.0 and 5.0, what the initiated by the Dr. Anika is the more important is the data. Data is the more important, where we can work on that, and without data we can't do anything. And the current in the coming sessions, you can see that the data will going to become the currency, so that we have to mention, we have to manipulate, we have to play with the data is a very important. Now, basically, I am in India, and Indore we are having a very big medical institution in my college, and we are the very big we are handling the very big size of the corona patient in our college, and we are working in the data with the corona patients for the some predictions and some how to reduce the cost of the patient during this all this period, how to reduce the cost of the patient. So I'm working on that, and that is the one thing computer vision will play the very important role in this case. If you see about that, the computer vision, we are playing with the X-rays and all this thing. With the help of X-rays, immediately we can find out that whether it's a COVID with some clinical inputs. What we are working on that in the medical, and I'm working with this with the help of AWS, this Amazon services, and we are having the Amazon Academy. Earlier we had the Microsoft Innovation Center in our institute, and we are the top 10 in the world that time. So, and now we are working so many things with the Amazon, and we are working with the, this computer vision, and we play the very important roles. So what's the computer vision is basically, if you say about something, this computer vision is nothing but it's an automated extraction of information from the digital images. And what we are trying to do that from the X-ray, how we can extract the images, how we can extract the important knowledge from that. That is very important. So this is a very and we are working on X-ray as well as some of the other images. So this is computer vision will play the very important role in the Industry 4, Industry 5, and so on, I think, and in continuation for the play the important role. You know, this also the very important when you go for the public safety. Nowadays, that is very important where we work on that. The public safety and the home security is very important applications where this computer vision is having the important. And in the authentications nowadays, you can say in the authentication, you are having the mobile authentication and then finger authentication, iris authentications, and we have the authentication of face authentication is very important role when we can say. And nowadays, you know, in the pandemic, this is what touch free is very important. The touch free is important is nobody is want to touch any device and all these things, so that the computer vision is very important for that. So it will play a very important role in the Industry 5, Industry 4, and all these things. And content management and analysis, if you talk about something, everybody is online. Everybody, university is online, university, and it's very important. Now, autonomous driving is also very, you can see about the Google Drive and all these things. All this thing will become computer vision is really play important. And medical imaging. Okay, medical imaging is very important. And I'm also the research advisor in the Namibia University for the 5 years. I can work together with for the medical imaging. If you are interested, we are having a lot of resources here with the computer visions, right? So medical imaging is a very important nowadays where we can apply the computer vision. And this computer vision is nothing but is the part of data science and machine learning. With the help of machine learning and the images, we can do a lot of predictions and a lot of things in here. And this again, manufacturing process control is also can done with the help of computer vision. You know, and this is what actually. Suppose I am taking the one example is a problem of this content recognitions. This is the one tray is there. In this tray, we are having the milk, we are having the other foods are there, but the computer can read it and can identify at what the block is there. Each part the computer can recognize, just like the human being, human can recognize is a bread and something. Then that is a challenge how the computer can classify that particular object. So this is what we can see that the object detections, then every objects can, just like you can see in your, when you open your mobile and you take pictures, then it will recognize your face, and there is some bounding box. There is a faces are there, something like that. We can with the help of computer visions, we can identify what's the tray is that, what's the value of that tray is there, whether it's a breakfast, it's a lunch or dinner or something else, or it's a plain tray. And without breakfast, this computer can easily identify everything And what are this 97 and 92, 97? This is what the probability of that milk is, a 97%. The computer vision can identify that. Then what's the probability of this ice cream is that this 97. And this is the object detection is a very, very important part. With the help of machine learning, these machine algorithms can do and can identify this the box, the coordinate of the left. There's a top left coordinate, top and left coordinate, and width and height. With the help of that, we can design this triangle and then identify that particular object. And this is again, the segmentation of the object is again very important, where the computer vision can this instead of this rectangle and all these things, we can exactly go in the depth, and we can in the irregular shape we can identify from this the individual objects. In the case of, I will not take the extra time for that, because and this content recognitions, if you see that when we are having the Olympic, we are doing that each and every person we can identify, each and movement of each and every player we can identify, how to improve the movement, how the coach can identify how to improve the player their style and all these things. So this is what that is known as instance tracking. Everybody how they can move from this side, how they can pass, and how they are moving, how they are running, and all these things, how they are making a kick, and all these things can be identified and can be improved for that. That is very important. The video analysis we can do. You can see that in the video analysis. Also action we can control in the mall and all these things. We can track of a person. We can identify the persons. When we can analyze the activities of particular persons. Each and everything can be easily recognized, can be processed with the help of computer. That is a very, very important. Nowadays we can see that every mall and every shopping complex is having the camera and all these things. We can control that camera with the help of computer visions. We can very, very easily. That is a very important. We can check the behavior and then of particular things are there. And all that can be done with the help of machine learning. Even then, motion estimations can also be calculated. By this computer vision. Then style, how this player can hit the ball, and what is the posture of that particular player should be in this case to hit the that particular ball, can be identified and can improve their game with the help of this. Now these are what I'll take this takes away for that. The computer vision is nothing but it's an automated extraction of information from images. That is very important. The image analysis include the object classification, detection, and segmentations. That is we can perform with the help of this computer, and that will play very important role in the Industry 5 and Industry 4. And video analysis includes the instance tracking, action recognitions, and the motion estimations. These are the very, very important where we can work on that. So I will be happy if the Namibia University can do the work. Can I share, and then I can have some association for this to work with computer vision. And under the Amazon Academy, we are having the Amazon Academy. We can share the contents. We can share the knowledge with your students, and a lot of things we can do here. Thank you for this, because I'm not having a lot of time for this. Okay. Thank you,
Dr. Mishra. Thank you. And I hope your call will be heard by your colleagues. Are some of you having a question, short and quick question? I see one hand raised, but I don't know if it is an old hand or not. Please, a question?
Yeah, no, it's a question. Thank you, Dr. Mishra, for that. You mentioned all the rosy stuff, the nice things about artificial intelligence, but we all know that we are so far away, because we know the biases in AI, you know, and
Right.
the ethical issues. And
Right.
even in the medical field, we have cases where medical algorithms were racially biased, favored white patients over sicker black patients, for instance.
Right.
So what are some of the solutions as somebody in artificial intelligence to some of these key challenges? Because without solving the biases in AI and also of solving the ethical issues, there's no way we can kind of really implement these systems to make sure that they treat everyone equally.
Right. That is one important point to handle this artificial intelligence algorithms and application. It's the data. How to manage the data. The data pre-processing is very important. If you have to pre-process the entire data very efficiently, then you can go for the algorithms, and then you can go for the processing and all these things, and you will get the entire good result, and you will get the around 99% accuracy you can find out. So that is very important is the data. What we are going to do here for the corona patients, we are having the X-ray, and we are having the chest X-ray, and we are having the chest X-ray in the PA side and the AP side. There are different sides of X-rays are there, but we have to find out where the point is there, what type of segment is very important to process it. So we have to process the data. Data is a very important. Thank you.
It's the key. Thank you, Dr. Misha. I propose to continue because we have no time. I propose that you can in the chat exchange or have a chat online without any problem. Sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Kishore, please, Chief Executive Officer at Vidyasanga Technologies. Please, could you make your presentation to us?
Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And in fact, I'm really fortunate and blessed to have all the learned scholars already doing their part in simplifying. Now I'm working for a US-based global talent firm while still holding my portfolio as a CEO for my own startup. So it's called EDW Architectonics. We would like to know if there is a talent anywhere in the world to source for the US market. And I really appreciate all the speakers, including the last speaker, Durga Mishra. And so I'd like to encash all their work done in shaping, even in setting the context for you. I'm just going back to United Nations report from 1700 onwards, where we have come to in the fourth industrial revolution. And so by the time now we are speaking 2021, the real GDP per capita has increased in US dollars from 1700 till now in an exponential manner as we have gone through first industrial revolution, then steam, railways, age of steel, electricity, heavy engineering, then oil and automobiles, mass production. Now after the mobile technology since 1990s, ICT, and that we have the tremendous growth of the per capita income thanks to mobility and internet. And there is analysis done about the developed nations and the developing economies. And there is a need to bridge the gap, as many of the speakers are talking about digital divide. And that's one of the aims that this fourth industrial revolution, knowledge and awareness, the skills and expertise that we can hone to take on the challenges of leading this rather than looking at the dashboard, as Madam Peters told us. So now this, in the times of information communication technology, there were a few concerns also that were expressed very well by the previous speakers of job losses, etc. But we will create new jobs, but we need to also make sure the disparities are within the limits in the societies. So these are all well already stated. And so by 2025, we would see these market size of the technologies. Most of them are digitally enabled. Most of it is led by Internet of Things, the drones, the UAV, solar photovoltaics. Then there is big data, robotics, AI. Everyone spoke about it. There is a speaker who spoke about 6G. So all this will lead it to aspirations from $350 billion to $3.2 trillion. And in fact, each nation is also hoping for $1 trillion economy. So India wants to be like a $5 trillion to $15 trillion by a decade from now. So we have average index score by geographical group. So world average and a geographical group average, North America versus all the other countries. So you see here, Asia is just able to touch the global average. And we see the Latin America, North Africa, and the Sub-Saharan Africa has a lot of milestones to cross. And the employment by skill level, the higher the skill levels, you get a higher wages. You see here on the top right, the right extreme talks about high skills, the light sky blue color, and medium skills, and then the low skills. So if you could hone the higher levels of skills, the wages will be also higher. And here the developing countries and developed countries, if you see that gaps in the digital skills, in the developed countries, more gaps are there. So that is very interesting. Normally developed does not mean that everything is developed. The developed countries carry some burden of the human disparities, something that world needs to work around. And so by mid 2030s, we can send humans to the Mars and return to Earth, and again also and a landing on Mars will follow. So basically what to do now? So all these things are there. We looked at cloud, we looked at computer vision, we looked at fourth industrial revolution and also fifth industrial revolution. So what to do now as individuals? So we have to make the source of knowledge professionals. So the people with knowledge are the ones who are going to help sort the best brains from all universities by some kind of hackathons, set smart goals to them, accomplish together, succeed with the interviews together, and not network a consultant. So a consultant's net worth is very high, huge. Infosys, for example, in their national annual report, they say we are a big company because each of our consultant is worth $1 million and more. So you have to mentor, guide, and support and care. Then you will make them win along with you as an industry winning in the battle. So basically, I suggest that we should have some kind of feedback mechanisms to have a good quality of service. And so you have to lead the organizations, for example, change management. So we have to do something like you create some inspiration, move from one scenario to another, just-in-time management, and that way you can bring out some strategic changes. By agility is also spoken about, and agility in public administration is also spoken about. All speakers spoke about this AI, 3D printing, drones, robotics, nanotechnology, photovoltaics. In fact, I'm working on a particular mission to apply this 5G, 6G for the drones and for making them collision free. And this is one of our research areas. And we want to transition the world from 2021 to 2030 to position humans in the Mars. So how can, for example, Namibia or African continent contribute to this research? That is what one should give as a task for the students in various levels of pursuits of knowledge. And United Nations are already given as a beautiful textbook, 17 sustainable development goals. All 17 are highly relevant for all of us. And just like Olympics every 4 years, push your youth to compete internationally in these 17 goals to accomplish using ICT and digital transmission globally. And you should have a renewable electrical power like a wind and solar, and agriculture and industry, healthcare, communications, and satellite navigation, etc. So basically, the challenges of future should be given a high priority for study so that African economies will move forward. And so you should have a mission definition. Already, I think all of you, the think tank, are developing that. And at the end of this meeting, all this combination of two different webinars will result into a kind of a white paper as a conclusions, a plan that includes the technology risk and then risk mitigation for also the possibility that 1.5 degrees Celsius from the standards of 1950 to 1990s by the worldwide. If we cannot stop the global warming beyond that, there will be challenges of food availability also, because the marine food, the fish, etc., is also not available due to the glaciers are melting, and agricultural scarcity also would come on account of floods, etc. So what we need to do is to use the technology to, this is the kind of a summary template I am talking about. In India, Indian government, from the last beginning of its independence, it started to embrace brotherhood with African nation. We have something known as India Technical Economic Cooperation. And our Prime Minister, whenever they visit any country of Africa, first thing they talk about is increasing the number of seats, free seats for the youth of African nations to come to India and learn the skills at the cost of Indian Ministry of External Affairs. They will be given accommodation and pocket money and education, tour, and then hands-on skills in highly learned industrial environments, and make sure that everyone has internet access and mobility. In fact, compared to GSM, globally it has been proven that code division multiple access is a cheaper technology, and it has a more wider coverage, which is needful for scenarios like Africa. And LTE is also proven, fourth generation. In between 2G and LTE, there was 3G, which was not well taken by the world. But then the 5G, 6G, as already one speaker spoke very well about 6G, and to tackle. So 6G is not like always greater than 5G. 6G addresses some of the gaps that the wireless has done so far. So it is also United Nations mission to take the 6G alongside 5G revolutions, so that we will have a better implementation of wireless deployments. So already everyone spoke about robotics, artificial intelligence. So we need to have also how to make machines learn is articulated so well. Therefore, robotics, AI, ML, deep learning, reinforced learning, and big data analytics is something to be done. We need to explore and innovate about, by 2024, demonstrate the capabilities in Africa, sitting side by side like USA, India, and China, who are now currently having good leadership, along with Indonesia and maybe Mexico, South America also coming up. So create wealth rather than doing World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and other funding. Help to create wealth and create, like, we need more oxygen. After the pandemic, we realized the world needs more technologies to have more creative design of oxygen cylinders, more hydrogen too. If you do that, then you can do fuel cells, and then nanotechnologies, and we have capabilities, we can do partnership. And we should do the electromagnetic compatibility and electromagnetic studies using some anechoic chambers and wind tunnels and computational fluid dynamics. And you have to empower the youth by emulating the global occupational standards. Every country comes out with some. India also has an NSDC. We have written a lot of qualification packs, which can be easily shared to Namibia and other countries, and they can emulate in their curriculums and see how there is a synergy there. And employability skills, like not just the software coding skills, but also psychometric analysis and software, the emotional quotient and other skills. I'm winding up another 2 minutes. So university research funding, we have to have research funding to have the innovation going on smoothly, so that the universities in these countries will compete with Harvard and New York Institute of Technology and Massachusetts and California Institute. Commercial output from the campus, take the output from campus and give it to industry, and do collaborative work with all the global navigational satellite networks like GLONASS, Galileo, NAVIC, which is coming from India, and therefore not just depend on one GPS in your applications. So these are some of the thoughts, and thank you very much for giving this opportunity. And I appreciate the work you are all doing, and good luck with your mission.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kishore. Very interesting talk. And do you have questions, comments? I don't see any. I think yes, that education and hackathons and participations into international projects are really the key basis for any kind of advances. Thank you, Dr. Kishore. I propose to call the Professor David Allen Greer, or Greer, I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong, fellow from IEEE and from the University George Washington in Washington, D.C.
All right, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here and very pleased that you were able to accommodate my schedule. I'm in the Mountain West and I'm staying at a relative's house who happens to be in Windhoek 2 years ago, just almost 2 years to this month. So I am pleased to sort of follow her. I'm talking about generations of computer science, particularly the skills that computer scientists need and how it's progressing and how it's advancing and how we need to think about the generations of computer scientists that are coming out not only now, but in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. In particular, you can see my, oh dear, trying to get my, there we go, my outline up. The question I'm asking is what skills are needed to be a computer scientist and how do we make sure that we have them? This is very much the role that I have been thinking about in my work with the IEEE Computer Society. And in particular, the way that the developed countries have approached this for the last 50 years is that we educate a large number of people with a great deal of skills, and then we let the market sort out what's needed and it's not. It's a wasteful way because we are educating people whose skills ultimately are not used. But in the end, we get what we need and we see the skill sets filling the jobs that are needed. In developing countries, that's harder because you often are educating people that you're putting great hope in. And in doing so, if you miss the target, if you miss seeing what the trends are, you are very much unable to get yourself and your country engaged in the bigger economy. I want to look at an issue called decisive skills. These are the skills that are needed by the core of the workforce. They're things that people, everyone sort of needs to embrace as being important. They're often the model for practice. And if you look back at the early age of computer science, back to 1952, which is for all intents and purposes when things get started. Prior to that, we have people working out with the ideas, but in 52, you have systems, you have computer centers. And the skills needed were those for numerical analysis for physics. You were solving partial differential equations, you were coding in machine language, and that meant you needed to know how to do subroutine calls by hand. You needed to know how to do memory management by hand. Those were the decisive skills. That's what we needed. I included this picture in it because this is the mother of a woman who was my advisor in graduate school. So I'm 3 generations removed. And those were the skills that she had. It worked for her for about, 5 or 8 years before she retired. And as she did, those skills took a new role. They haven't vanished. There's still who use it. This is the staff of the Supercomputer Center in Stuttgart, Germany. That was taken when I visited them several years ago. But it's a small fraction of the community, and it's not decisive. They don't set the standard. They don't provide the ideas that we need to advance the field broadly and to meet the needs of the world as a whole. It's often useful to think of technology generations and sort of pin it on people and sometimes on hardware. The first generation begins really in 46, but it centers in 1952 when we start getting systems. This is obviously John von Neumann. Behind him is his computer, which has become the model for computers ever since. It was largely a period of bespoke machinery. Becomes a product later, not that much later though, in the 1950s, where people can buy one and you now have a set of standards that you need to follow, and you need to educate a generation to follow those standards. The next one is that you start seeing the shift towards software. And in particular, operating systems were the big tool that forced that shift. And that meant that you were educating people who were starting to be a bit removed from hardware. You were interfacing with it slightly differently. Many of these pictures in here have a connection to me. That one is my father. And that he's standing in front of a Burroughs 1800 in roughly 1965. The micro, interesting, is another hardware shift that we identify, but it's really software. There's another barrier being put between the user and the hardware, and people are now engaging in it who have very little understanding of what's going on beneath those software levels. The fifth, I have stolen this idea from Japan. They had a project called the Fifth Generation. It was for high performance computing. It operated in the 70s and 80s. The idea was building machinery, largely artificial intelligence. And it developed a huge set of skills. But if you go through and you read their final report, you begin to realize that none of those skills have turned the corner. None of them are ones that really moved forward and moved a generation forward. And particularly their software skills were interesting, were fascinating, but they lasted for a very short period of time. About the same time, we get a generation that's starting to be skilled in networking. This is the ARPA net design team from the 60s at their 20th reunion, which is about the time networking technology really starts to grow and we build skills around it. And then finally, clearly we have moved to a skill set that involves mobile computing and cloud computing. If you want to look at sort of the dates, you can get a sense of how quickly these changes occurred. And it brings to one of the key issues. A human career is 30 years long, roughly. The peak contribution that any of us make is about 15 years. And from this, the question is, can we look at inflection points in computer science and see where there are intergenerational transfer of skills? What skills move forward and what skills get left behind? And again, when I talk about left behind, they're ceasing to be central to the field. Many of them still exist, many of them are still important. They just don't shape the field as a whole. So I'd like to throw down a timeline for you. We start it then, we end it now. And I'd like to look at it as we would roughly generationally. I've marked it off in 15-year increments. And those increments, again, are meant to sort of indicate, if we start in 1952, what are the key, the people who did their key contributions, if it lasted for roughly 15 years. There are a couple confirming points. In the mid-'80s, there was a substantial change in computer science and computing. We pin that often on the micro and the rise of the software industry. It's also coincidental with the retirement of the founding generation. And I think they put together a huge group of skills that largely did not transfer to the people beyond them. And I think that's important to note as you're thinking about computing, not only for a country, for an economy, for an industry, but also for a university. What skills are needed to go forward, and when are you preparing your students for the skills that you have, and when are you looking ahead to say what's needed? So if we look at the first one, period, I'd like to point out that the transfer really came with software, that was an important shift when we stopped dealing with the hardware. I put as an example for that Admiral Grace Hopper. She was an early software pioneer in higher level languages. She helped develop COBOL, had a little bit of hand in Fortran, and was largely a spokesperson for the use of these ideas. We forget that it took a lot of effort to get people to use them. The argument was that they were inefficient, that they hid activities that people thought should be visible, and that they removed skills that people thought should be known, in particular, how the basic switching and timing systems worked. That meant that we had a basic shift. If I could get back just for a moment, excuse me. Oops, I'm going ahead. A basic shift on these roughly around late 70s and early 80s. Prior to that, we are fundamentally concerned with hardware. After that, we are concerned with software. But there is in this transformation a concept that comes out very clearly that marks this, whether it's hardware, software, or any other thing. And that's black boxing, putting concepts in a box, and we deal with the box, not with what's inside. This is an idea that we borrowed from electrical engineering. It's developed in Germany largely in the 1930s. And in doing that, that has become the hallmark of what changes activity, what changes the skill sets that we need. Our next change is what happens to software. And in particular, the concepts of software engineering are developed heavily during the 1980s and early 90s. I list SWIBOC because I'm an IEEE partisan. I was obviously very deeply involved in the Computer Society for quite some time, still am involved. And that's their product. And it's the software engineering body of knowledge that comes out in the early 90s. That in many ways black boxed software development. That and there's the technology of object-oriented programming. I've become increasingly aware that that marks a point of inflection too, that comes together with SWIBOC to a point where by the early 90s, it's not sufficient just to be a programmer. You have to think systemically, and you have to think systemically in terms of a very rich ecosystem, an ecosystem that involves databases, that involves networks, that involves other things that require you to think in a much more complex term about big things, and you can ignore small things. In this period, for example, floating point arithmetic is standardized. In 1980, it is not. And at that point, people in designing programs had to think about how you're doing your arithmetic, what is the error rate on it, even if you were just doing something like a business system. So we've got another point of inflection that occurs about 30 years in. And it seems clear that we have been in a changing skill set since the late 90s that has been quite substantial. If you want to pin a start, I'll do it on the Google PageRank algorithm. Crowdsourcing comes in, and that was where I really got tied into it deeply. Autonomous transportation is another big one that I think we as a field overlook because we jump to the next step, was the Netflix recommendation algorithm of the early 2000s. That was an algorithm that was developed through crowdsourced methods that we all deal with daily in a variety of ways, that recommends things for you to purchase, recommends movies for you to get from their service. That was done with one set of tools in the late 90s. The crowdsourcing brought a second set, and now it's clearly a machine learning process. And by understanding that transformation, we begin to see the set of skills that have come out of this that have displaced some of the ones that made for a successful computer scientist in the late 80s and the early 90s. And that gives us another inflection point. And we may be very close to it. We may have passed it. It may be a little bit in the future. And that is where data and data assessment reign as a determining factor in our workforce. I was at the biannual meeting of computer science chairs in the United States. Oh, it was now 4 years ago. And this point was discussed quite thoroughly in a big, large open meeting. And there was one chair from a fairly prominent university who got up and said, "Does this mean the end of computer science as I know it? Does this mean my skills are gone?" And it was really quite a plaintive cry. And in fact, it sort of was a statement that that was gone. And yet at another point, it was a statement of how this field changes. We're releasing 5 different technologies converge right now, and they're converging for a moment. I need to make that clear. When we are planning and looking ahead, we are really looking in a small window. We're looking at things that involve right now. Cloud computing is still important, Internet of Things, big data, crowdsourcing, which at this point really now has become game theory and numerical psychology. And those are now very important to how we think about designing systems. And of course, the big game right now is machine learning. That is such a dominant activity. And yet, from my perspective, it's doing things that's displacing other things. I see graduate students taking it and applying it very broadly in ways it was never intended, but in ways that are producing interesting results. It clearly has displaced an interesting aspect of statistical analysis with people who just throw a machine learning algorithm at a problem and let that work. It's also displacing a certain amount of coding as we are getting interfaces that allow us to make decisions about how workflow moves through a program through machine learning. So this is really changing things, and it's changing things at a huge scale. And it's capturing a human experience, including the experience of being a computer scientist. And as we hear often, it's eliminating programming time. Well, it isn't. It's reducing and it's shifting it. And it's shifting it to a new set of skills that bears little resemblance to the set of skills that many of us are used to. So that leads to a question. What's the nature of computer science? What is the leader? What's the intellectual foundation of the field? And we quickly discover that there's a literature on this. And as a former editor of Computer Magazine, I can tell you the literature is very contentious. And people get up and yell at each other and cry and scream. What's computer science? How's it different from computational science? What's the difference between computer engineering, software engineering, so forth and so on? The answer is that they're all very tightly connected. The boundaries are very thin, but they all bear a resemblance to what Herb Simon, one of the great computer scientists from the 50s, called the science of the artificial. He said, we all deal with the problem of what can be mechanized. And it's a field that in this diagram is supposed to suggest it, as you have an inner core of technology that, involves the laws of physics or something almost as immutable as that. You have an outer ecosystem of practice that is the social and business and political and economic and educational and psychological demands upon us. And we deal with a thin shell between the two and try and get those two pieces to work together effectively for the benefit of the outer ecosystem using the tools of the inner core. Well, it's been an avaricious field. It has stolen ideas from every other field of human endeavor. Mathematics is a founding field. Electrical engineering is a founding field. One of the things we don't acknowledge as a founding field is factory engineering. The term programming came from a commonly used term in the 1930s for how you organize mass production. Quality control, quality assurance, the foundations of software engineering are factory engineering. Military management has become part of it. Economics has become part of it. Psychology has been a part of it far longer than we admit. And we take these tools and we move forward. And in that ecosystem, in that world, we often have to look to the ecosystem to really understand what is happening and how it works. And the ecosystem has often been filled with people who define what computing is and how it fits into the world, and we respond to it. In the early 50s, it was often these people are management or business leaders. Chester Bernard from AT&T, American Telephone Company, defined how organizations were structured. He had a very strong militaristic sense of how it worked and how the various pieces work together. And he fit computing into, in many ways, its current business sense of as information processing for the larger business community. And we have followed that idea in many ways ever since, but it was the hallmark of the early computing period. In the middle period, the 60s and early 70s and 80s, Peter Drucker, who defined the information worker, he in many ways laid a foundation that we still follow and we ignore because of certain aspects of his career and how he founded his ideas. But the idea that information processing was work, that it fit into a bigger community of workers, that when I've heard all these people talking about Industrial Revolution 4.0 and 5.0, they are echoing his ideas and showing how computing fits into that. In the late 80s, late 80s to early 90s, it was Tom Peters who really focused attention on the cycle of continuous improvement. Again, a factory engineering concept from the 30s. The idea of gathering data, managing by data, looking at data to understand the processes going on, not only in business, but in government, in education. And he became, what's fascinating about him is he became a model for a generation of computer scientists in defining their world. And his ideas have largely been debunked by the current generation. And I think that points out something. As we move forward, we leave ideas behind. Right now, we are seeing a very interesting transition from the ideas of Clay Christensen, whose disruptive innovation. His ideas dominated the computer discussions of the late 90s and 2000s. He died about a year ago. And with his passing, with the challenges we have faced with the pandemic, we see the world pulling back from his ideas of completely destroying industries, destroying products, destroying processes, and asking, how do we go forward in a more effective, in a more preservative manner? Who's doing it now? I'm not clear. I think we're very much at a transition point. And the transition point is driven by things that I've heard mentioned in this meeting already. It's being driven forward by the fact that we have had to face a global threat in the pandemic, unlike any that we have faced. This is something that we are all in together. The climate change issue also as well. The fact that we have a manufacturing base that is now global in a way that it has never been. All of these things work together to ask, how are we tied together? Who is our neighbor? How do we support our neighbor with information, with analyzing that information, with assessing that information? And that means we got to go back and look at the skills that we teach. What are we giving? And this is a list of things that have been commonly taught in computing starting at day zero. In particular, if you look at that first group, that was the core of the 50s. It is no longer core. Certainly during my last years of teaching, I handled many of the mathematics courses, but those were now a small part, and we honestly were talking about eliminating mathematics requirements or reducing them greatly. They, in many ways, have become, I put in quote leadership skills, not because they create leaders, but because they distinguish advanced students from less advanced students. They're harder, they're less connected to what people do, and hence we can use them to separate out a group of people who are able to deal with more difficult issues. That's not necessarily the most efficient way of doing things. And I think that is another side of where we are. We can afford to waste fewer people. We cannot afford to educate people and say, we've given you a top education. Oh, your skills are not needed because the field has shifted. These programming, system integration, security design, these are core skills. These are going to be with us for a while, though all of them are in various stages of maturity and need not be considered as permanent. The bottom group are contended skills. They have had strong parts in our field over the last 15 years. They probably have a longer life yet to go. It's not clear what form they're going to take, particularly the statistics field. We now deal, because of machine learning, with statistical models that have millions of parameters. Most of the traditional statistical tools are being used in a way that grossly misinterprets their original intent, but they seem to work, and we seem to find ways to make them work. Game theory is not formally as much a part as I would like it to be, but then again, who listens to me? But it's seen in so many aspects of how we are looking at human behavior with systems and the human-computer interface, and how we guide customers, how we guide workers, how we guide students to specific conclusions that we want them to make. These are the skills, and these are shifting, and how I use them and how you use them are important and made their mark in the field, but it's not necessarily the way our students are going to use them. So we're getting to the end. Does that mean that computer scientists are losing control of computer science? Do we no longer define what we are? The answer is, of course, yes and no. We're the people who make it. We're the people who define the basic categories. But one of the things about this field is not only do we steal ideas from others, we've never really had complete control of our destiny. One of the things that the original definition of computer science comes out of the early 60s. There are about 4 schools that quickly build a thing around a definition that came out of J.C.R. Licklider, who was a psychologist. And he gathered around him a group of about 5 or 6 people to define what are the major problems that needed to be attacked, with computers? What did we need to do? What concepts did we need to develop to attack them? What were the kinds of solutions? And almost every person he gathered around him was trained as a psychologist, not as a mathematician, not as an electrical engineer, the two dominant fields, but as a psychologist. So with that, what's the nature? Is it changing? Yes. It's certainly most changing, and the skills that we think we need for today are not going to be the ones we need for 5 years out, and definitely not for 15. Will it drop all the old methods? No, of course not. They will bubble through and we will find all sorts of uses, just as some of the very conventional programming methods are still quite heavily used for a variety of tasks in the field. Will some people be unable to go forward, including some of our students and some of our young professionals? Yes. We are educating people for today when we need to think about what tomorrow is. When is the divide? When do we see an intergenerational shift? It's not clear, but it seems fairly clear that we are close to a period where we will see a generation of computer scientists moving forward that will have very little to do with those from the 90s and the aughts, that those two groups will not be able to talk to each other very easily. So that is my talk, and here is my card with my email. I'm very grateful to have been invited, and if there are questions, I will gladly take them.
Thank you, Dr. Greyer. It was really a very nice talk, and putting in perspective the evolution or revolution, as well as the shifting of skills that are needed to progress and not to get lost in the road.
Yes.
Are there any questions from the attendants? Yes, Colin, Professor Stanley, sorry.
Yes, no problem. Thank you. I would like to really thank Greer for the talk. I was actually not surprised that psychology was also coming out as a strong field for computer science, was a skill. And I think it also goes to what we are creating is to have human values and personalization. And also, I mean, if you think about even the new trend that we are trying to move into, or that we are moving to, it's also about bringing human values. And I'm really on for human values in our creation and to really understand how humans operate in while we're creating these machines. Thank you.
Yes, I think you have a very clear understanding. You said it very nicely. Yes, exactly. Trying to get human values into this and how we do it. And in particular, if you go back and look at, a classic of the field, John von Neumann's Computer Science and the Brain, it's a lovely thing. You see a lot of current activity in it, but he's not focused on the values as we are focusing on the values. And that represents some of the shift between what we and what members of this conference are doing and what he saw 50 years ago.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Greyer. And let's go through to the next chapter of our workshop. Thank you very much. I propose to give, before the working group being presented, the working group of computing and for IR, to give 3 minutes to Dr. Bajpai to present some slides concerning the evolution in Rwanda. Is it okay for you?
Yeah, it's fine. To share my slides, I need the previous presenter slide.
You can ask for share, I think, and then it is shared, no?
I'm getting a message, you cannot share screen, share while other participant is sharing.
Okay. Please, the host, could you, let me try to see if I can unshare. Ask, stop sharing. Okay, I did it. Okay, go ahead. 3 minutes, no more.
Okay, give me a second to start sharing the screen. Let me share my screen. I hope you can see it now.
Yes.
So I'm just giving you an overnet of Internet of Things, what we do in the University of Rwanda. Myself, Dr. Bajpai, senior member of IEEE, ex-CIO of UR. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Computer and Software Engineering. I hope you can hear me. So we belong to Africa. We are in the center part of the Africa, as we call it here. So moving on, in our university, we have 6 colleges, which are different in technical colleges, business, education, medicine, of course, agriculture. So in 2016, we did, with the help of CERN and ICTP, a school of physics where the participants are. I cannot figure out if I can see Katevi around, but he was there and in this pic as well. So we also do some other activities like Rwanda Association of Engineers, which we have. We do quite a lot of meetings on that. We did some online as well on-site training with IEEE LED, light emitting diodes, solar cells trainings. And then we also did some green ICT initiatives, how we can solve the problem of e-waste and things like that. So in Rwanda, we do a community service called as Umuganda. We also started the Umuganda service in ICT so that we can have a cleanup of all our campuses with falling wires, tipping things and all those things. We went to the tea factory. This is where we deployed an IoT application. A tea factory traditionally looked like this. It's a Sri Lanka tea factory called as Suvartha. The students made a on-site deployment of how to do the humidity and checking of the humidity on the leaves. So we also do some implementation of IoT framework on data analysis using deep learning methods for occupancy prediction in a building in case of a fire. So I'm not going into the depth of all these things. The case is that there is a fire, and these are challenges we see in the fire since 2010. So we proposed a framework that we should have some mist node, which will be the sensor node inside the spaces. It will send all the information to a message broker, which is MQTT, which will be collected on the fog node and go to the cloud node. All these nodes are present here. We also made a local cloud. So I'm not going into details. When the slides will be shared, people can have those looks. So we have two components. One are the sensors, where we have the mist, PIR, and the CO2 light sensors. Also, we have the actuators, which are called as the sound alarm, LED, and sprinklers, in case there is a fire and we need to exit. So the sensors on the left side send the messages to the EMQ, and then from the right-hand side, the subscribers can subscribe and send the messages to different authorities like Rwanda Traffic and rehabilitation and things like that. So moving on to, this is how we collect the data. So once these data is collected, we use an LSTM, a long short-term memory, which is a deep learning algorithm. So details of this deep learning algorithm mathematics is provided here, but not to go in depth. We are just going to show you the deployment of the sensor. It is connected to a local server. Then it is connected, of course, on the web server, which is on the desktop machine, which you can see through virtual events. And this is a place where we connected those sensors, and we had a record of 19,000 something records. And when we did the temperature, humidity, and we classified all of them, I want to show you this specific diagram where we see these all these humidity, temperature, light, all these sensors are relevant to each other, which one is affecting the most to our prediction of the algorithm while we do the analysis. So while we are seeing this, we see a lot of parameters that have to be checked. We also calculate not only using LSTM, we use naive-based classifier, support vector machine, multi-perception. This is what we have presented here, but we used 8 different machine learning algorithms to do the things. But in prediction, it's always a problem to have errors. So we calculated 5 different kinds of errors which can come up and regulate so that we remove the noise in our prediction analysis. And this is how we found out that LSTM was coming out to be one of the best. And it was showing by having a testing and training model, which was 30-70% division of our data so that we can do a prediction analysis, which we saw and which we can see in these kind of slides. So while these are all for 4 different parameters, the temperature, humidity, CO2, and light model. So in general, what all the participants have said, So we have tried to implement those things of IoT, including machine learning with artificial intelligence, going back, doing some deep analysis, correcting our results, doing a prediction, and maintaining another prediction to final results. So this was also put on a cloud and a fog on a mist node, so that we can structurize our things, and then we can globalize it to a bigger extent, means scale it up. So thank you. This is what in brief we want to do in 2-3 minutes. Thank you, Geeta, for allowing me to have a small talk.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Dr. Bajpai. I propose that if you have exchanges, you can do it by the chat. Sure. And I will thank you very much. And I will give the field for the next session, that is the presentation of the Computing and Fourth Industrial Revolution working group member. And Ketevi, please, the chairman is Dr. Ketevi Asanagan, and I give him the field for this session.
Thank you, Rita, for the introduction for the first session in the morning. That was very, very well done. It's greatly appreciated. I'm just going to share my screen very, very quickly. So let's see. All right, so in this session here, we're going to have a panel discussion that will include a couple of presentations by myself and Rita. The panelists are here: Dr. Francesco Petruccioni from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, Dr. Happy Sitole from the CSIR in South Africa as well, and Dr. Rita Rahal from CNRS, Ian Duputroy, Lyon, France, and Professor Dharam Singh from North Namibia, and Dr. Gaurav Bajpai. These 5 people are also coordinating the Computing and 4IR working group of the African strategy, which I will introduce very briefly. So before we go to my introduction, I would like to give the opportunity for each of the panelists, if they are with us, to give us a brief statement about themselves and what they are doing, and for Computing and 4IR for Africa, for the country, and for Africa, and so forth. So I'm not sure if Professor Petruccioni is with us.
I don't think so. I haven't seen.
Okay, so in that case, let's go to Dr. Happy Sitole, please.
Thank you, Ketevi.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Happy Sitole. As the chair has already indicated, I am from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. My role is to lead the national integrated cyber infrastructure in South Africa. And its purpose is to ensure that we have got infrastructure, skills, and facilities for computing. We also have networking infrastructure in the country, what we call the NRAN. And we also have got the strategy for long data storage and also the data manipulation. So the interest, obviously, from our side is also to ensure that we extend this to the rest of the African continent. So we do have got programs that we run, like SADC Cyber Infrastructure, that is looking at empowering the SADC countries, leading this to the rest of the African continent. So we'll be very happy to work together with the committee here, and especially with the theme of this conference of machine learning, artificial intelligence in ensuring that Africa is ready for the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sitole. I suggest that we go to Dr. Rahel.
Yes, you heard me already a lot today. So I'm Rita Rahel. I am working actually at CNRS, that is the French National Organism for Fundamental Research. And I have a background of physics, and I have been a particle physicist for a long time. From now on, I'm working to set up and to be sure that experiments get the computing that they need, given the size of the data that is accumulating and the complexity of the analysis that are going so far. I have been more focused on the LHC experiments at CERN. Actually, I am also involved in a lot of projects, European projects that are building the future infrastructure, neutralized infrastructures for open sciences. And I was interested by joining this nice working group because my origin is African. I am Algerian, and I feel that I need to work with the African people to make sure that we enter into the game, at least for what concerns physics and research, the fields that I know. I'm sure for the other fields there is no problem. Voilà, I think that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Rita. Let's go to Professor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Myself, Professor Dharam Singh. I'm professor in computer science at Namibia Institute of Science and Technology. And the university just received the UNESCO Chair Award in Smart and Secure Environment. And we will deal in 3 subdomains. First is the communications, second one is big data infrastructure and cyber security. My interests span on multimedia communications, wireless technologies, machine learning, big data infrastructure, mobile communication system, edge intelligence, AI network security, blockchain, and artificial Internet of Things. So those are my interested areas that we are working for master and PhD students. Just I want to highlight something because I also the co-convener of Computing for Working Group. And in previous meetings, we planned for this workshop. On behalf of the organizing committee, Data Science, Machine Learning, Artificial Intelligence, I would like to highlight that the workshop on computing and fourth industrial revolution will be invited talks, presentations, discussions on some sub-themes we discussed and approved in the last meeting in our working group. Some of the sub-themes are intelligent communications, automation system, data analytics and intelligent tools, IoT, edge computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the deep learning. In the security domain, cyber security, especially in terms of blockchain, federated and shared computing, sharing knowledge, and software architecture with artificial intelligence. And I would like to, you see, now in this workshop, we have invited talk as well as the discussion. And I would like to, I'm happy to share that we received 9 papers from the African researcher. So 9 papers were presented in African Symposium by African researcher, which organized on 2nd day of the conference. So we can take some recommendations from those 9 papers for our working group. That is all about me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Singh. Let's go to Dr. Bajpai.
Oh, I think I presented myself, but thank you for calling me again. Myself, Dr. Bajpai. I'm a senior lecturer, Department of Computer and Software Engineering in the School of ICT in College of Science and Technology in University of Rwanda. So a year back, I was also acting as the Chief Information Officer for University of Rwanda for the last 2 years. And we developed before pandemic, we were able to develop a data center, which now hosts the UR e-learning platform, the email IDs, and all those systems that we used in the pandemic. And even just now I was teaching and I just used the same platform that was created by our team. So in general, what we want to pursue is IEEE activities. We want to pursue the African School of Physics to happen more. We have more virtual presence, or we even on-site presence. We have a lot of systems here, and like nowadays the COVID happened, and we have vaccinations. All these certifications are coming through our portals, apps, which are created by our own, students which have come up and now have joined the ministries and all. So I've been here from the last approximately 15 years. And before that, I was in Sudan. And before that, I was pursuing my PhD in India. So, by the way, I've been a global partner. I've been in South America with my father and US and everywhere. So I have lived less life in India than I have lived outside. So that's all what I can say about myself. In general, I want to also call upon the African Center of Excellence in Internet of Things and Data Sciences, which exist in Rwanda. There are other African Center of Excellences as well in different parts of the African subcontinent, which also we can project in when we are putting up the strategy for the African School of Physics. If I remember this is the second tier. There was a first tier, and in both of them, there were around 24, 25 of them. So if we have 50 schools of excellences, out of which 10% were on science and technology, we can see we can have a lot of master's students and PhD students already approaching to their finalization of the thesis. And they can be a good input to our strategies in the computing for AI, IR. Thank you. Anything else?
Okay, thank you very much to all the panelists. So what we're going to do now, I have a short presentation, which I am going to go through. And then Dr. Rahal also has a presentation about the African strategy and the computing and 4IR as a part of that strategy. So I'm going to share my screen and then go through a few slides. I think you are seeing my share screen. Let me make this full screen. All right, so what is exactly what we call the African strategy? That's what I want to explain very briefly. So I think there are some people who need to mute. Anyway, so the situation is that there are a lot of things going on in Africa and the rest of the world, and we wanted to have community-driven strategy in physics and related applications. And ultimately, it's about getting the community of physicists and applied physicists and computer sciences, all those related fields, to come together and decide or discuss what should be prioritized continental-wide for Africa. Resources are limited. People are solving problems in small groups or in small areas and so forth. In some cases, solutions are duplicated. So through this strategy, we want to see whether we can
pull back a little bit, take a look at all of those things, and make better use continentally of limited resources for improved impact. So that's basically what this strategy is about. But you know, it's not the first time people are doing strategies. I think a lot of groups and societies and policymakers are developing strategies all the time. The African Union has strategic visions. The Agenda 2063. These are strategies defined by top level at the you know, African Union level. We have the African Academy of Sciences that define strategic visions. And we have large communities like the Square Kilometer Array, or even health in Namibia and so forth. And even at national level, people talk about strategies. So what's the strategic plan for the next 5 years or 10 years? And all of those things have, you know, exist. So now, why are we proposing this particular strategy? What do we bring in addition? So what we would like to bring in addition is this community-driven strategy that goes beyond each country and each region of Africa and goes even internationally. Bring all of those people together to talk from grassroots level, not something that, you know, to complement all of those strategies that are coming from top down, from, you know, maybe the African Union and African Academy of Sciences. Those were essentially already set and dictated in a way from the top. But we would like to come from the bottom as just the communities of ordinary scientists to talk about what do we think is important for Africa to complement, you know, what is coming from the top. So that's the idea here. Now, in terms of these grassroots community-driven strategies, there has been quite a lot that were already done in the world. For example, the European countries, they get together and talk about European strategy for particle physics. They have been doing it for a long time, and every 7 to 10 years or so, they repeat it. They get a mandate from the CERN Council, CERN, the European Laboratory for Particle Physics, gives them the mandate to do this. And they solicit opinions from the European community and globally all the people involved in particle physics. In the United States, they also do that. They are in the second iteration right now. They also get a mandate from the, you know, a recognized society, American Physical Society. And it's not just in particle physics. The astrophysicists in Europe also have done it. In Latin America, they have finished a strategy recently, was their first one, which combined high energy physics, cosmology and astrophysics, and the computing aspect as well. And this is significant because it's the first time Latin American countries actually, across countries, got together, got a mandate from the Council of Latin American Ministers to develop this strategy. And that's exactly what we want in Africa. So it's not like the ministers who got together and then decided through some channel what should be developed. They basically let the physicists work it out and come up with a strategy document, which, you know, was mandated by the Council of Ministers. I would like to stress that that type of strategy we don't have in Africa, that it is grassroots by the physicists across countries, getting together and discussing what is important and what are the priorities and writing that for the policymakers. That's what we are talking about here. And other countries, they do their strategies. Japan, India, China, they have the history of having their user physics community develop strategies driven by grassroots. So that's what we want to establish in Africa. Okay, I'm going to skip this this slide. And what will be ultimately the purpose of that? So we will ultimately, if we succeed, end up with a report prepared by physicists across Africa and beyond. And when I mean physicists, I mean the entire community, because physics uses a lot of instrumentation and a lot of computing. All that collection of people who make sure that physics research makes has progress. That's the community that I'm talking about. And so ultimately, we will basically have a document which tells the politicians that this is what the physics community thinks is important in the next 10 years. And this is the strategic vision for 20 years. Okay, now the politicians, what they will do then, hopefully at the level of the AU or at the level of the African Academy of Science, they can then say that, okay, this is what physicists are saying, people concerned by physics development, research and education in Africa. This is what they are saying are the priorities in these various domains. Now, if they want to put money somewhere, then they can decide where they want to put the money. Now, when physicists develop grassroots strategies, politicians don't implement all the priorities. It never happens because money is always tight. So they selectively decide what they want to fund, what they want to implement. And then 7-10 years later, at least in Europe and in the US, the policymakers they go back to the physicists and say, redo your strategy, and things have changed in the last 10 years and maybe priorities are different. And then the community, they review the strategy again, and for the policymakers who again don't implement everything. But the point is that the community of scientists or physicists, they are not discouraged because the process of doing the exercise is already enriching. You have the community coming together, discussing and arguing, disagreeing, and so forth, and that is a very rich process. Now, I'm not saying that there are no inter-country collaboration in Africa. Like I said, people are solving problems regionally and so forth. You have people from South Africa working with people from Namibia. There is the SADC region, and West African countries try to do something. East Africa, they have communities trying to solve common problems and stuff like that. Those things are, they are there. We want to go beyond that continentally and then, establish the culture of coming together every 7 to 10 years and discussing across, all the countries in Africa, all the physicists and computer scientists who are involved in physics-related projects. We shake everything down and we redefine the strategy and we tell the politicians that this is, our statement. And we know that they're not going to implement everything, but we won't get discouraged. Now, if we establish that process, then 10 years later, young people who become now professors and so forth, they will be responsible to redo that strategy. So we want to establish that culture across, Africa. But it doesn't mean that it's only African physicists who should be involved. Africans are doing projects internationally all the time. So we want people across the world who are doing projects in Africa to be involved in this process. So we've started the first one, the first strategy process. Here's the website, and on the left here, these are all of the physics groups that are involved. We also have engagement groups, and these are topics that are of importance. For example, community engagement, and how do we talk to people about physics, the importance of physics and computing, and how do we engage politicians. how do we deal with issues of brain drain or finding jobs for people that we educate and stuff like that. And we also, the issues in physics, basic physics education, women in physics, young people that we are training. We have a lot of people who are getting PhDs but are not finding jobs. So we believe these things are very important. These are the physics group that we have. One of them is this computing and for IR here. And here are the conveners. So these 5 people that just introduced themselves, they are the one leading this group. You can join this group. We invite you to join. Okay, here's the working group of the entire group here. Yeah. And then, this is the mailing list of the entire group. And this one is the mailing list of just these 5 people who are the conveners. If they want to talk among themselves. But if they want to call a meeting of the entire group, they will use this list here. Okay. And if you want to register to this, you can go back to this website. And here's the registration. You will be added to the list. And if there is a meeting, you will know about it. And we want you to come and to contribute, because this is, like I said, community-driven. It's Pan-African. You are concerned by this. We want to hear your voice. It's not just something by a small number of people. We want everybody who wants to participate to come here and then to participate. So we are at the level where now we want to call for community input in a sense of letters of interest, which I want to, just finish briefly with that. So now, because you may be thinking, how can I participate? Come to the register first. Yeah, you will hear more from Gita. Register to the mailing list, so you will be aware of what is going on. Then you can bring in your voice. Okay, and then you will see what comes next. So we are now at a level where we are soliciting community input. So this is what we are calling these letters of interest. You can submit one in computing and 4IR on all of the issues we just discussed now that have been talked about today. You can submit a letter of interest in any of those issues. And by going to this website, we are only asking for 2 pages. Okay, so hopefully it's not too much time for you. And now, what is this letter of interest? It's just anybody's ideas of what is important for Africa, or what are the issues we should be looking at. If you want this computing and 4IR working group to look at a particular issue, either of interest in your country or in your region or in Africa, then by all means go to this page and submit a letter of interest. It could be a paragraph or up to 2 pages. It will not be make public to anybody. Only working group members will know about it, but it gives us an idea of what the community at large thinks is important. So we need that community input to be able to then say that after we have discussed, these are what we think are the priorities. That's why your voice counts. Now, even if you don't want to join the working group, you can still submit a letter. Okay, I'm sure you know yourself what are the problems for Africa, and by all means, please join us. And this, if we succeed with this, it will be the biggest gathering of scientists and computer scientists continentally and beyond, to really try to shake the future of where our politicians put money and funding. It will not, then at that point, it's dictated by the physicists and the computer sciences. It's not just politicians now know what is important, what to fund. That's exactly what we want to do. So I will stop there.
Thank you, Katevi.
So maybe what we can do, we go to Rita's talk, and then after that, we have discussion.
Okay, I will try to share my screen if I manage to. Usually it's the host that is unable to do that. Share the screen. Oh no, wait a second. This one, share. Okay. So now, how can I enlarge this one? Slideshow. If I do slideshow, does it work? Okay. Is it okay like that?
Yes.
Okay. So please, Ketevi, don't refrain to tell me if I'm too long. I wouldn't mind. Okay. So I'm presenting on behalf of the Computing and for Industrial Revolution Working Group. You have already had the presentation of the people that are part of this group, that are the conveners of the group. You have seen that these people have a very very diverse profile, which is interesting because everyone is biased towards what he knows. So it's very good to have something that gathers ideas from different experiences. So first, as an acknowledgement, I would like to thank all my colleagues because they provided input and they provided slides sometimes. And I would like to say that any mistake is mine, as well as the very subjective choice on what to present. So I will concentrate on physics and fundamental physics, but you can extrapolate to any field of physics without any problem. So actually, physics is driven by projects that are worldwide projects. For example, you can see a very big projects and very big experiments that are situated in Africa and in which a lot of African colleagues participate from South Africa, from Morocco, and more. You can see here the HES, the high energy stereoscopic system that is based in Namibia, and that does gamma rays astronomy. You can see here, so this is Africa. You can see here in the middle, Bell 2. This is a Japanese experiment, a mondial world experiment that is based in Japan, so in Asia. You can see here Atlas experiment. Atlas experiment is one of the 4 experiments that are based in the LHC in Europa, so at CERN. You can see here Dune, that is an experiment of neutrino production, neutrino experiment that is based in the United States, Americans. You can see here, finally, a huge mega project that is called Square Kilometer Array, so SKA, and that is based also in Africa, in South Africa, Karoo region. So it's very little, very few of the experiments and projects that are running all over the world. But what I would like to raise here is that all experiments and research are producing very huge data sample, and now they are heading towards the exabyte scale. Just think about SKA that will be producing 500 petabytes per year. This is just the primary data of SKA. 500 petabytes. If I refer to the LHC, it means that you have at least 4 times more in derived samples. Okay, so I want to concentrate on the role of the computing. What is the role of the computing? So in the large sample of collected data in research, but also in industry, the computing provides first the resources, hardware or whatever, to cope with all the steps of the data treatment. It's not the computing that is interesting per se, is what it will produce at the end. The computing will provide also tools to order and make sense to raw data sample, whether the raw data samples are biomedical or they are physics or they are whatever, telephone data, databases. And in the end, the computing is the resource that will give us the capability to extract the rules, so either physics rules or models or whatever, and or to look for a needle in a haystack, as I said. That is, for example, the example of the research of the Higgs boson, where you have to research for one event within billions of events. So you have to have very strong computing for that. So all the strategic reviews that Ketevi just talked about, there was this European strategy update in 2020, the SNOWMAS in 2021, the Latin America that has just been reported recently. They all have highlighted the role of the computing as one of the essential blocks for discovery. Just for a small reminder, I'm old in physics, and I can tell you that 20 or 25 years ago, there had been a problem suddenly because the people have never accounted for the computing. They accounted for the detector, for the accelerator, but the computing was just something natural, and then they found themselves in front of a bill that was at the level of the bill of the detectors, the building of the detectors. So that's why it's very important to highlight the role of the computing and to have it ahead. Okay, so what means the computing in 2020? Of course, computing means infrastructure. We will not. We will need all the time this infrastructure and the advances in processes, in cores, in power, everything, in green energy, also in green, green energy, sustainability. So infrastructure is computers, supercomputers. Here I just highlighted you Jean Z, that is a new supercomputer in France. Of course, you have high throughput computing, high performance computing, GPUs, and so on and so forth. So you have the computers, you have the data storage repositories, but you have also, of course, the networks, the bandwidths, everything that helps for the data movement and data access all over the world. But this is the infrastructure. This is not sufficient anymore. It means also something that is becoming more and more increasingly important. It is what I call abusively the software and intelligence. So software, what I mean by software, I mean software, I mean, for example, at the resources level, all the software that is somehow applications layer built on top of infrastructures. So these abstraction layers that are built on top of heterogeneous structure allow people all around the world and from everywhere to have a uniform and mutualized use of the resources. And what is very important also is that it can, after that, serve different research community. Just as an example, basic example, I mean high energy physics. High energy physics has developed very, very important resources, but so far they were the only ones, due to the complexity, that were able to use these resources. Now we know that the money is and the budget is scarce, so we have to mutualize this at a higher level, not only for high energy physics or whatever, but be able to build something abstract that would fit any kind of sciences and any kind of research. On the right-hand side, this small graph is a project in which I'm participating that is called ESCAPE. This is a European project where you can see that in the middle, you can, here you have the, sorry, here on the lowest part, you have all the computer provisioning. It can be anything from grid computing, from cloud computing, from HPC computing, from computers at home. And this access also distributed regional storage that can be in India as well as in Africa. And you have services that will hide this complexity or this heterogeneity in order to give an exact same access to anyone. So that is very important. So this is the applicative layer, the software as applicative layer. The second thing that is important, if you have data that is different, for example, you are working on a medicine and you have the data from imaging or whatever that is stored differently for the same use, it doesn't work. So you have to have some, at data level, you have to have open access and fair data services. Fair means what? It's the big word actually. It means findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. It means that we have to make software able to make the data somehow uniform and easily accessible, whatever the person or whatever the field that is going to this data. So this is a very important point. Otherwise, we cannot share collections of data and we lose a lot of capabilities of discovery. So I was talking about software. Now intelligence. Of course, we know actually, and with all the talks that have been presented before, that this fourth revolution or evolution, as you wish, comes really from intelligence, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Of course, there are a lot of fields in industry that are already using it at any kind of levels. In physics, for example, this is already in use in branches of research to increase the discrimination of the data. I told you that the data was just like garbage in which you have to take one event out of all the garbage. So you better discriminate your data. You will boost your discovery potential. You will replace lengthy calculations that will cost a lot in power by machine learning and artificial intelligence. And you will boost and optimize the use of modern hardware. Just for fun here, I show you a table where it is about the discovery of the Higgs boson in 2012. So this is here, if you, I hope you see it clearly, this is the sensitivity without the machine learning. You can see here, for example, the sensitivity is 2.5 sigma on the data that was collected to do this analysis on a certain channel of Higgs. And if we use for the same data the machine learning, we boost it to 3.4 sigma. This means that if we don't have machine learning, if we did not have machine learning, we would need 85% additional data in order to probe the same distribution or to same discovery. So it shows here the economy and the discrimination level and the power of the machine learning and artificial intelligence. So, of course, I give you a poor example of physics. I'm aware that the developments are totally driven actually by industry, and they are used in various subfields also. So, there are also future research fields, and these are very, very far future, but the competition has begun already. It is quantum computing, for example. There are big investments around the world. The investments are of the order of the billions of dollars in the US or in Europe or in China. And of course, it is a very complex engineering, And there are challenges like being able to make stable qubits or stability of the system. The things are rapidly evolving, but they are far from being at production level. So this is another field that is interesting to keep in mind. So, of course, I concentrated on high energy physics, but all this evolution can benefit of all types of research fields. For example, HPC and artificial intelligence systems will strengthen the application development of packages such as bioinformatics, climatology, astrophysics, computational fluid dynamics, etc., etc. Of course, also this will accelerate the R&D in the war against COVID and the discovery of drugs and the vaccines, of course, because of faster simulations, medical imaging, and forecasting. So, as I said, even though only research was highlighted before, same problematics are shared between research and industry partner. In some industry is ahead, in other it is research. So the main topics that were highlighted also through this workshop are security, AI, big data analysis, internet, and I want to mention the World Wide Web because it's a research product that came all over the world. So I cannot move my slide. Yes. So all this here in the sorry. Yes. So the fourth industrial revolution emerges from artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things that I have not talked about directly. So the key concept is, as I have shown in physics research, is the enhancement of the efficiency in the processes of industry by having better interconnection, data integration, innovation, and transition. So these are basically the research stream that you can find for this industry, the 4.0 technologies. And you can see that a lot of these thematics here are common to public or physics research and to industry in general. I think, yes. So I have made a very brief turn about all the topics that I wanted to show. So what is the Computing and for IR Working Group? It is one of the working groups of the African Strategy for Fundamental and Applied Physics, called ASFAP, that Ketevi has just shown you that this working group is just one of the parts of the global strategy. It is important to state that it is a group that is transverse to the other groups. Of course, because computing is not boosted only by computing, it is boosted, it is driven by the research communities because they needed to boost their output and their innovation. And the roadmap for our working groups is to collect the inputs by means of LOI, surveys, conference, discussion from all the African communities, researchers, research scientists, computer scientists, all the people that are involved in this, and evaluate the needs in terms of organization, infrastructure, education, training, and draw recommendations to provide input to decision makers. So after that, thank you. And you can find in backup some of the fields that the working group has scoped. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm finished.
Thank you very much. So I think now maybe we can have questions or comments to any of the panelists or the talk that we have presented.
I don't see the Your face, PTV. I don't know if I lost the screen.
So for our panelists, if any of you want to add any other material?
Thank you, Dr. Kate. I think we already discussed with Dr. Geeta, and she included the things in the presentation. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the room? Any discussion, comments about things that are missing maybe in this overview of the strategy? No.
So I shared a few links into the chat to the website of the African strategy. So I will encourage people to take a look, and also to the Computing and 4IR working group, and also a link to submit letters of interest. So we would like to hear from people on that. Like I said, it's not just African, so our colleagues here from India and elsewhere, please, submit letters of what you think is important that could be useful for Africa, or even where you think has been important and successful in India that could serve as a benchmark. Yeah, so we want to hear about all of those things. So the call for the letters of interest is a global call, and we want to hear from everyone. And also, if you want to participate in the working group of the Computing and 4IR, the link is here. You go over there and you follow the link to registration. You will be able to just register, and you'll be on the mailing list, and you can participate at your own leisure. I also want to say that the call for the letters of interest are not just to the computer scientists and the physicists. We want to hear from all walks of societies, even policymakers, university official, is everybody, because we are all concerned about the same sort of issues, which is education and research development in Africa. So I think everybody has an idea of what should be improved, where we should have the priority. So even non-physicists can submit and letters of interest. And I also want to specify that the letters of interest are not just in the computing area. So like if you go to this website here and you want to submit a letter, let me just reshare that a little bit very quick. If you want to submit a letter and you go over here, you will be able to select in which category your letter falls. Maybe it is in physics education, or it is in community engagement, or it's in women in physics, or it's in young physicists issues, or it's in some other field, material physics. We have all of those fields in there, so you can write a letter in that field. And if you believe your letter goes across different fields, we have an option also there to select, for you to select the category, the secondary category. Yeah, so it's a global call in computing and all of the other fields. And it's not just for physicists. Like I said before, the letter is not binding. It's your opinion of what is important. It will not be judged. It's not wrong or it's not right. We just want to hear from you. What do you think is important for African development in all of this field? We want to hear from the community. We want your input. That will help us define the priorities, or what, how we should write a report the policymakers. So everybody should feel free to submit a letter in any of the categories, including computing and for IR. So I think, Colin, you have your hands raised.
Well, I have my hand raised. Yeah, but I think I can come in. I think, thank you, Katavian, Dr. Kita and the Prof. Singh working on this. For me, it's quite, very, very important that we work on such initiatives and strategies for our continent. And what I would really, I'm willing to work on a group. And for me, what would be interesting is for us to really embrace our indigenous knowledge and cultures and our own languages, because these are the core of our communication, the core of knowledge construction, on how we think and how we dream. So it's very, very important for us that we include that in the knowledge construction, especially now that we are creating artificial intelligence. And we know our cultures really has different ways on how we construct knowledge. Our knowledge at most times is not so written, it's embodied, it's in our ways of doing things. And if we can really ensure that this aspect of our cultures and languages are part of the strategies and they are taken for us as a priority. So I think that was my observation, and really appreciate what the team have done so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Anybody else wants to add? Oh, yes, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Chair. So in continuation of Dr. Colin, yes, we had some presentations in our research day, faculty research day from the faculty, and some of researchers presented on the indigenous knowledge and natural language programming software and architecture. And in the workshop, there is also one sub-themes based on the knowledge sharing is the name as training and sharing knowledge. You already included Dr. Colin in our theme of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. KTV, is there anything?
I'm not sure if anybody else has any other comments or.
Yeah.
Okay, so I look forward to seeing your letters of interest. That will be great on any of the topics that are important. So what will happen is that the call for letters of interest is open now until end of November. And then what will happen is that all of the working group will look through those letters and they will categorize them according to the working groups. And you may, for example, maybe you submit a letter on some aspects of computing, and then somebody else in Sudan or in Cameroon submit a letter on similar issues. So we will collect those and we'll categorize them. And then we will contact you in Namibia and the person in Sudan and say, okay, look, you guys have similar ideas on this topic. Would you guys want to work together to develop that a bit further? That will be the purpose, So we'll group those letters according to the topics that they fall under. And then we will put all of the people who have submitted letters in those various categories and similar topics. We'll put them together to basically merge the ideas into one document, which will be then a part of the strategy report. So that's what we want to go. So we're talking about 2-page letter or less. So the letters are just ideas. They don't have to be a scientific demonstration of that particular idea. It's just we want to hear your opinion. That's what the letter is until end of November. Then after that, when we group the letters according to topics, at that point, we then will have write-up of that particular topics, which should then now be scientific, in the sense that your ideas now needs to be justified either by some survey or by some studies or by some research that has been done or that you have done, and the references are put there. Then it becomes like, okay, now we have gone from idea to a more scientific narrative by putting together all of the people who have submitted letters on that similar idea. Yeah. So that's how the process is going to go. And when we get to the level where we are merging these letters of interest, that narrative will be published. So if you have work on that, you will get a paper. So it's not going to be a waste. Yeah. But the letters of interest themselves, because these just ideas, they will not be publishable. It's just your opinion, everybody's opinion. As an individual, as a university official, as a head of department, as a student, you can submit a letter of interest. We encourage everybody to submit. There's no wrong here. The more opinion we have, the better it is for us. We want to hear what everybody thinks. Yeah. And then when we categorize them, then we can say, okay, hey, John, you in Namibia, you submit a letter on, computing strategy for Southern African countries, and you in Cameroon, you submitted similar ideas for Central African countries, but they have common strategies. Why don't you, the two of them, merge your letters of interest and develop one narrative now that is really more scientific. It has the reason why you think what you think in your letter. How do you justify it? And it can be published if you want at that level. And now you are in Namibia and you are working with somebody in Cameroon or somebody in Rwanda to develop one particular idea which has emerged in your 3 letters of interest into something that could be published, and that will go into the strategy document. Okay, so that's the process that we are going to adopt. So by all means, whether you are in Africa or you are in India, elsewhere, and I'm saying that because I know our colleagues in India, they have a lot of progress in these areas that we can actually learn from and take some stuff from there. So we want them also to submit ideas, how things have worked over there, and where are the emphasis now. So it's useful for us to know that as well for the African context. So anybody who has connected to the meeting today, please think about submitting letters of interest. It's 2 pages or less. It could be just a paragraph. It could just be a paragraph. It could be up to 2 pages, and that's fine. And then after that, we'll deal with the letters. So the call is open from now until November. Okay, so we look forward to seeing your letters of interest, either in computing and 4IR or in any of the other areas that you may believe is important for Africa.
Okay. Just to add, and don't forget if you have the possibility also to advertise this initiative, to advertise it around to have more people involved in it. So, if there are no more questions or comments, I propose to close the session. And before closing the session, I would like first to thank all the speakers that have been participating into this workshop and that have given us a very interesting and very enlightening talks. I would like to thank also warmly, to thank a lot the University of Namibia and Dr. Colin Stanley to have given us the opportunity to present here this initiative at the level of Africa. Very many thanks to you and to your university. I would like to thank also Professor Damsing, because he was the one that that brought us into it. And thank you very much, Professor Dan. And I think all the people that have worked to make it smoothly working are also thanked and welcome. Thank you very much to all, and have a nice evening or Monday, or I don't know what, but whatever part of the day you are in. And I hope to see you soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Vika, thank you, Dr. Patel, thank you, Colin.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.